Chapter 229. The crowd, who had dispersed because of the pill lightning earlier, had once again gathered in the huge empty square. Their eyes were all looking at the few figures in the middle of the square. Xiao Yan, MOD and the rest were standing in the middle of the square. The various experts in the judges' seats were also present. Everyone's eyes were looking at Xiao Yan and MOD. A cold snort was emitted from MOD's nose in front of everyone's eyes. Soon after, he raised his hand high up under his sleeves. His 5 fingers slowly extended, and a round medicinal pill was exposed to the air in his palm. The instant this medicinal pill appeared, an extremely rich pill fragrance spread out. The rich pill fragrance was like a fog as it enveloped the medicinal pill, causing the medicinal pill to be faintly discernible when one looked at it. It appeared as though it was an illusion, giving it a somewhat mysterious appearance. TSK, is that the shumi pill? It is indeed worthy of being an emperor-tier medicinal pill. If I can get my hands on it, I won't have lived my life in vain. That's right. As long as I can obtain this emperor-tier medicinal pill, I will be able to create another half-emperor level expert out of thin air. Just thinking about it makes one's blood boil. Ha 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 ha. MOD involuntarily laughed out loud at this moment when he heard the numerous exclamations that were transmitted from the mouths of the surrounding audience, and the envious gazes that were shot over. His eyes, which were filled with a cold smile, slowly swept over the entire stadium. Finally, they landed on Xiao Yan. His hand was extended toward Xiao Yan. The medicinal pill in his hand also landed in Xiao Yan's eyes. MOD first glanced at Xiao Yan, after which, his eyes landed on the shumi pill in his palm. He deeply inhaled a breath of the extremely rich pill fragrance. The corners of MOD's mouth lifted into a cold smile. Soon after, he laughed loudly. Shumi pill, an emperor-tier medicinal pill. Its effect is to greatly increase the user's strength for a short period of time. If a half-emperor level expert consumes it, his strength will increase by 1 to 2 stars for a short period of time. Whoosh! Loud cries of surprise immediately rang out from the crowd after MOD spoke. Everyone stared at the Meru pill in MOD's hand with a feverish expression. Even some half-step emperors revealed greedy gazes as they looked at MOD. Although the effect of the shumi pill was not a permanent increase in the user's strength, just the fact that it could greatly increase one's strength in a short period of time was enough to make people excited. After all, when experts at the quasi-emperor realm fought, even the slightest difference in strength would cause the outcome of the battle. For example, although an 8-star half-martial emperor like Gu Li possessed the strength of a middle-stage 8-star half-martial emperor, when compared to Yan Bing who possessed the same cultivation level as him, they were 2 completely different levels. Yan Bing, who possessed the strength of a peak late-stage 8-star half-martial emperor, was completely capable of completely suppressing Gu Li within 100 exchanges if she were to go all out. However, if Gu Li were to consume a Meru pill, he would be completely capable of instantly increasing his strength to that of a 9-star half-martial emperor in a short period of time. Although it would be impossible for him to increase his strength to that of a true Dodi, Gu Li would still have the opportunity to turn the tables on Yan Bing. Although there was only a single step of difference between a 9-star half-martial emperor and a peak late-stage 8-star half-martial emperor, a 9-star half-martial emperor was capable of suppressing Yan Bing, who was at the peak late-stage 8-star half-martial emperor. This was also the frightening aspect of the Meru pill. A miraculous medicinal pill that could reverse the situation of an entire battle. How could this not cause people to go crazy over it? Haha, since that's the case, Grandmaster MOD, please bring the medicinal pill over so that the old man and the rest can appraise its quality. Hearing MOD's arrogant laughter, Gu Li instead smiled faintly. He placed his hands in his sleeves and looked at MOD with a sneer on his face as he spoke softly. Hearing Gu Li's words, MOD immediately revealed a dissatisfied expression. He withdrew his hand and stored the medicinal pill into his sleeve. With an ice-cold expression, he looked at Gu Li and coldly snorted. Humph! As a rank 2 alchemist, the D-tier medicinal pill that this old man has refined is without a doubt a pill. Do I need you to appraise it? Hearing this, Gu Li could not help but smile. He coldly laughed and suddenly waved his large sleeve. A majestic aura immediately spread out. At the same time, he coldly cried out once again. MOD. You are indeed a rank 2 alchemist. Naturally, no one will doubt the medicinal pill that you have refined. However, please do not forget that this is the Alchemist Grand Meeting that is being held right now. During this period of time, you are only a participant. This old man is the judge. As long as it is a medicinal pill refined by a participant, regardless of what rank you are, you must hand it over to this old man for appraisal. Why? Is Grandmaster MOD planning to violate the rules of the Grand Meeting? If that is the case, please leave. This year's Grand Meeting will directly declare that you have forfeited. Hearing Guli's cold cry, MOD was so angry that his face trembled. Just as he was about to say something, Guli's threatening words forced him to swallow his words. This caused MOD to become even more furious. However, at the same time, MOD was helpless in the face of Guli's pressure. Given Guli's status, if he did not hand over the medicinal pill for appraisal, Guli could really declare that he had forfeited. This was not worth it for MOD. Humph. Even if I show it to you, it will not change the fact that this old man is the champion. With a cold snort, MOD waved his hand. The D-tier shumi pill in his hand turned into a ray of light and directly flew towards Guli. Old Demon Who and Old Demon Who were standing beside MOD, also narrowed their eyes and looked at Guli. However, in Old Demon Who's eyes, a different thought flashed across his mind when he saw the shumi pill flying towards him. When Guli saw the medicinal pill flying towards him, he did not dare to be careless. After all, this was indeed D-tier medicinal pill. It was reasonable for him to face it properly. Just as the shumi pill was flying towards him, Guli suddenly lifted his hand under his sleeves. An invisible gentle force instantly surged out from his palm and gently caught the medicinal pill that was flying towards him. At a glance, the expression in Guli's eyes involuntarily hardened. Although MOD was not a good person, it must be said that the shumi pill that he had refined was indeed a completed pill. Moreover, based on its quality and the surging energy within it, this shumi pill could be considered a top-tier pill amongst completed pills. After a careful inspection, Guli finally carefully passed the shumi pill in his hand to Qilin. This shumi pill still needed to be appraised by the other alchemist grandmasters in the judging panel, before a conclusion could be reached. Therefore, MOD only took a second look at it and did not say anything. A moment later, when the shumi pill was returned to Guli from the hands of the last alchemist grandmaster, the crowd once again looked curiously at Guli. After all, no matter how good MOD said this shumi pill was, at the end of the day, Guli still had to represent all the judges to give a verdict. At that time, this shumi pill would truly be considered an acknowledged D-tier medicinal pill. Under the gazes of tens of thousands of people, Guli's gaze slowly swept across the entire place. As he looked at the black mass of people on the viewing platform, a smile slowly surfaced on the corners of Guli's mouth, after which his gaze landed on MOD. The two of them looked at each other. MOD had a cold smile on his face. He was quite confident in his shumi pill. This was because this shumi pill could be said to be the highest quality D-tier medicinal pill that he had refined in a long time. It was because of this that MOD had absolute confidence in being able to defeat Xiao Yan. A long while later, everyone in the square was completely silent. When the entire place was completely silent, Guli slowly opened his mouth and smiled. D-tier medicinal pill, shumi pill. Top-tier completed pill. In the next moment, the empty square, which had been silent for a moment, was immediately filled with deafening exclamations. When the answer in their hearts was confirmed by Guli, it finally caused these fellows to involuntarily cry out in surprise. From this, one could tell just how frightening the allure of an D-tier medicinal pill was. At this moment, MOD's face was filled with arrogance as he laughed heartily. Finally, even Guli had no choice but to admit that his shumi pill was a top-tier completed pill. Now they would see how Xiao Yan could compare with him. Even though Xiao Yan's Emperor Tribulation pill was also a completed pill, he lost to MOD in terms of pill refinement speed. In the end, MOD was still the champion. The champion's position was already firmly nailed to MOD. At this very moment, even the audience on the viewing platform were looking at Xiao Yan with regretful expressions. This newly promoted rank 2 alchemist, who had received the most attention in recent months, had ultimately been defeated by a veteran alchemist. And D-tier medicinal pill was really not something that could be casually refined. Haha everyone, since we have already appraised Grandmaster MOD's Shumi pill, next, it should be the Emperor Tribulation pill refined by Yen Xiao. Suddenly, Gu Li's soft laughter once again sounded while the crowd was feeling sorry for Xiao Yan. At the same time, Xiao Yan also smiled towards Gu Li. He gently lifted his hand, and the green Emperor Tribulation pill appeared in front of the crowd. However, the crowd no longer had any illusions about the Emperor Tribulation pill, which had already been declared the winner. All of them shook their heads as they looked at the Emperor Tribulation pill in Xiao Yan's hand. Waves of regretful sighs were emitted from their mouths. It was as though Xiao Yan's Emperor Tribulation pill had failed to be refined. Not only that, quite a number of people in the viewing gallery had already moved their bodies and flew back to the savage ancient city below. From their point of view, this year's Alchemist Grand Meeting had already come to an end. Since the champion had already been decided, there was no need to continue watching. Moreover, from the way everyone saw it at this moment, MOD's Sumeru pill was many times better than Xiao Yan's Emperor Calamity pill regardless of whether it was the quality of the medicinal pill or the time used to refine it. Currently, the outcome of the Alchemist Grand Meeting had already been decided. Hence, it did not matter whether they saw or heard this Emperor Calamity pill. Compared to the soft sighs of the outsiders, Xiao Yan's face was calm. There was an indifferent smile on the corner of his mouth as he looked towards Gu Li. The two of them exchanged glances. In the end, both of them smiled with a tacit understanding and did not say anything. Xiao Yan handed the Emperor Tribulation pill in his hand to Gu Li and ignored her. Instead, he turned his gaze towards MOD. He wanted to see just what kind of expression MOD would have after hearing the outcome. When MOD saw the faint smile on Xiao Yan's face, he involuntarily frowned slightly. In his heart, he could not help but mutter, "How can Yen Xiao still smile when he has already reached such a stage? Or is he just forcing himself to smile in order to make me feel even more worried?" However, the more MOD looked at the mysterious smile on Xiao Yan's face, the more uneasy he felt in his heart. It was as though he had missed something on Xiao Yan's body. However, just as MOD was about to investigate once again, Yan Bing, who was standing by the side, suddenly unleashed her aura. Her icy blue eyes stared at Xiao Yan. The frightening aura that belonged to an expert at the peak of the advanced level of an 8-star bandit pounced toward Xiao Yan. Her icy cold killing intent was not hidden at all. It was just like an invisible sword that instantly slashed toward Xiao Yan's brow. This sudden scene caused Gu Li and the others on the other side to be unable to react in time. By the time they regained their senses, it was already too late. The terrifying aura pierced towards Xiao Yan's forehead. If Xiao Yan was unable to dodge it, it was likely that even if he was able to survive, his body would definitely be seriously injured, and it would be difficult for him to live for long. However, just as the expressions of Gu Li and the others changed drastically, Xiao Yan's heart was as calm as an ancient well. Although the aura pouncing towards him was indeed terrifying, it was a little too naive to think that it could injure him. Xiao Yan. When the aura arrived, a thought passed through Xiao Yan's mind. Immediately, a black light rapidly flashed and appeared in front of him. At the same time, an incomparably large hand suddenly clenched into a fist. A punch was thrown towards the terrifying aura that was pouncing towards him. Bang! An explosive sound rang out. At this moment, the entire void square shook slightly. At the location of the explosion, numerous terrifying cracks involuntarily appeared on the hard void square, penetrating through the entire square. Seeing this, Yan Bing's icy blue eyes involuntarily hardened. She never imagined that the puppet beside Xiao Yan would actually be so powerful. Its strength in fighting across levels was not the slightest bit weaker than its master. With merely the strength of a 6-star half-martial emperor, it was actually able to fight against an expert at the peak of an 8-star half-martial emperor. From this, one could see how powerful this puppet was. Humph! Elder Yan Bing, aren't you going a little overboard by doing this? No matter what, Yin Xiao is the chief alchemist of our association. By attacking him in front of so many people from our alchemist association, you are truly not putting our alchemist association in your eyes. Gu Li coldly snorted. The various elders behind him immediately turned their gazes towards Yan Bing. The latter was also shocked by these gazes. She knew that now was not the time to shed all pretense of cordiality. Immediately, she coldly snorted and spoke in an indifferent voice. There is no need for you to scare this old man. If he had not threatened Mod first, this old man would be too lazy to take action. However, from the looks of it now, this chief alchemist of yours does have some ability. After her words sounded, Yan Bing involuntarily glanced at the Northern King, who was standing in front of Xiao Yan. The strength of this puppet caused even her to involuntarily feel some fear in her heart. After Gu Li coldly snorted once again, he turned his gaze back to the Emperor trial pill in his hand. A moment later, when Gu Li once again carefully received the Emperor trial pill from the alchemist grandmaster, a smile that had yet to be completely revealed on his old face finally slowly surfaced at this moment. At this moment, all the alchemist grandmasters from the Alchemist Association, with the exception of Qi Lin, and some of the independent alchemist judges who had come from outside, had an extremely grave expression on their faces. In their hearts, they did not dare to believe that the quality of the medicinal pill that had just flowed through their hands had actually reached such a level. At the same time, a pitiful expression involuntarily surfaced in the eyes of these alchemist grandmasters when they looked at Mod. Of course, most of them had gloating expressions. It was really rare for them to feel pity for someone like Mod, who would resort to unscrupulous means. A long while later, Gu Li raised the Emperor trial pill in his hand with a brilliant smile in front of the remaining audience who had yet to leave. His eyes glanced at Mod, who had a suspicious expression on his face. After a couple of breaths, Gu Li finally opened his mouth and spoke with a pause between each word. D-tier medicinal pill, Emperor trial pill. High grade. D-tier complete pill. Chapter 230. Emperor grade complete elixir. As soon as these 4 words were spoken, the entire place was shocked. Everyone present seemed to have heard something unbelievable at this moment. Some of them were even slightly stunned when the words Emperor grade complete pill rang out. It was as if they were unable to react in time because of these words. However, when they regained their senses and noticed the 4 words Emperor grade complete pill, in Gu Li's words, their faces immediately revealed an expression of disbelief and shock like the others. In the void, the spectators and some half-emperors who were about to leave hurriedly returned when they heard Gu Li's words. Their faces were filled with shock as they looked at Gu Li in the middle of the square. It was as if they wanted to verify the words that they had just heard. In an instant, the empty square, which had gradually become empty due to Mod's Sumeru pill, was once again filled with surging human heads. In the middle of the square, Mod's face was filled with disbelief as he looked at Gu Li. The words that Gu Li had spat out from his mouth earlier were like a bolt from the blue to him. Even Mod himself did not dare to believe that Yin Xiao was actually able to refine an D-tier complete pill. In Mod's opinion, this was impossible no matter how one looked at it. An Emperor-grade complete elixir. Not to mention Mod, it was likely that any rank 2 alchemist present would not be able to refine it. It was also because of this that Mod's heart was greatly shocked when he heard that the D-calamity pill that Xiao Yan had refined was a complete D-tier pill. At the same time, a deep doubt appeared on his face. He did not doubt that the Emperor-grade complete elixir that Xiao Yan had refined was a true Emperor-grade complete elixir. After all, it was not as if no one present did not recognize an Emperor-grade complete elixir. However, Mod was suspicious of whether Xiao Yan's Emperor-grade complete elixir was truly an Emperor-grade complete elixir. The concept of an Emperor-grade complete elixir had disappeared from the ancient savage city for too long, causing everyone to almost forget about it. After all, for nearly 1,000 years, the highest-ranked alchemist in the ancient savage city was only a rank 2 alchemist. Moreover, the success rate of an Emperor-grade complete elixir had always been extremely low. Therefore, when everyone saw an Emperor-grade complete elixir, their first thought was that it was a complete elixir. As for anything higher, they would never think about it. Now that the Emperor-grade complete elixir had appeared, it would definitely cause a storm in the city. After this moment, Yan Zhao's name would definitely shake the southwest border. In the middle of the square, Mod's lips trembled slightly as he looked at Gu Li. More accurately speaking, he was looking at the Emperor-grade complete elixir in Gu Li's hand. At this moment, his skinny firewood-like body involuntarily trembled. MOD's heart repeatedly muttered those 4 words. Emperor-grade complete elixir. Emperor-grade complete elixir. Emperor-grade complete elixir. The corners of Gu Li's mouth also curled into a cold smile as he looked at MOD's pale face. He exchanged glances with Qi Lin by the side, and immediately felt incomparably carefree in his heart. The large rock in his heart had finally shattered at this moment. They had finally managed to protect the association that they had painstakingly built in this grand meeting. Of course, they clearly understood that all of this was thanks to Xiao Yan. If not for him, the final winner today would not be them. Gu Li's body moved. He held the Emperor-grade complete elixir that Xiao Yan had refined in his hand and slowly flew into the sky in front of tens of thousands of expectant gazes. His turbid old eyes swept across the entire square. Finally, his gaze landed on Xiao Yan below. Gu Li's face finally revealed a smile that was difficult to hide. Immediately, he faced the entire square, raised the Emperor-grade complete elixir in his hand high up and laughed out loud. Emperor-grade complete elixir. Emperor-grade complete elixir. After being appraised by all the alchemist grandmasters in our judging panel, we have unanimously decided that it is an Emperor-grade complete elixir. Clamor. Once again, this affirmation caused everyone in the square to release a thunderous cheer. Everyone looked at Gu Li with a fanatical expression. Emperor-grade complete elixir. It really is an Emperor-grade complete elixir. This is something that has not been seen for hundreds of years. Hearing the enthusiastic cheers of the entire crowd, Gu Li also laughed heartily. However, immediately after, he pressed his palm on the empty space and comforted everyone. When everyone's gazes were uniformly on him, Gu Li opened his mouth again and smiled. He said, "Everyone's gazes are on him. Haha, this year's Alchemist Grand Meeting is the most popular one that this old man has seen in so many years. Not only did 2 Emperor-grade complete elixir appear in succession, most importantly, one of them is an Emperor-grade complete elixir. This old man Gu Li is proud of the prosperity of this Alchemist Grand Meeting. At the same time, this old man officially announces that the champion of this year's Alchemist Grand Meeting is, ha 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 ha, Emperor-grade complete elixir? Now that the elixir is in your hands and the people behind you are from your alchemist association, it is only natural that you say so. However, this old man does not believe that this brat can refine an Emperor-grade complete elixir? Who knows if this Emperor-grade complete elixir was taken out by you from the alchemist association?" In the empty space, before Gu Li finished speaking, MOD suddenly laughed wildly. His words caused everyone in the empty space to start whispering. Although MOD's words were not pleasant to hear, they were not without reason. When MOD saw this scene, he could not help but laugh coldly in his heart. He continued to speak with a smile. "Ha, but that's right. In order to protect one's position in the association, there is nothing wrong with doing this. However, you have also said that this is the Alchemist's Grand Meeting. During the Grand Meeting, anyone who oversteps his authority will be disqualified. It seems like our association leader Gu Li is trying to steal from his own people." Humph. MOD, have you said enough? As the judge of the Grand Meeting, this old man's judgment is fair. I disdain to do such despicable acts. With a cold snort, Gu Li waved his sleeves and retorted MOD's words. His face was cold as he looked at MOD. His gaze was extremely cold as he continued to speak. Moreover, little friend Yan Zhao's alchemy skills are superb. He can even refine an Emperor-grade complete pill. Why do I need to use more tricks? On the contrary, you MOD, only think about how to win the championship. You have used all kinds of tricks in the competition. Humph, I didn't expect that even God is not willing to help you. In the end, all your efforts are in vain. In the end, it's just that your strength is not good enough. Why do you have to deceive yourself? A series of cold and disdainful ridicule immediately caused MOD's face to turn red. His heart was incomparably furious because of these words. It was a long while later before he laughed out of anger. Ha ha ha, good. Gu Li, I did not expect you to have such a sharp tongue. That's great. However, this old man does not believe it. Can this brat refine an Emperor-grade complete elixir? Haha, after saying so much, you just want to personally check the quality of my elixir, right? Xiao Yan, who had been looking at MOD, smiled faintly as Mod's words sounded. The corners of his mouth were lifted into a cold smile, as he casually opened his mouth and asked. Mod once again snorted coldly upon hearing this. However, he did not refute. His gaze swept coldly at Xiao Yan before it once again landed on Gu Li. You alone cannot determine the quality of this elixir. It must be appraised by this old man. At that time, even if I lose, this old man will be convinced. Mod's words were filled with a strong sense of righteousness. However, an obscure glint flashed across his eyes as he spoke. When Gu Li heard Mod's words, he immediately laughed coldly. Based on his understanding of Mod, he naturally did not believe these words. It was even more impossible for Gu Li to hand over the Emperor Trial Elixir in his hand. Otherwise, if he were to hand it over to Gu Li, who knew what would happen to the elixir in his hands, at that time he would not be able to explain himself. Humph. This will not do. According to the rules of the Grand Meeting, the elixir refined by an alchemist cannot be appraised by a competitor. I think you should not spend any more effort. Haha, Association Leader Gu Li, since a competitor cannot do it, it is not against the rules to let others appraise it, right? At this point, Mod was clearly prepared. He looked at Old Demon Who with a faint smile. The latter also smiled. He looked at Gu Li with a strange smile, and opened his mouth to speak. That's right, Association Leader Gu Li. Since Master Mod cannot do it, let us old fellows appraise it. I believe that I have the ability to identify an Emperor Trial Elixir. Ha 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 ha. You. Gu Li's expression changed again when he heard Old Weirdo Who's words. Just as he was about to say something, the audience in the arena began to chime in. According to common sense, Mod's request was indeed reasonable. It was not unreasonable at all. Gu Li immediately frowned when he heard the waves of private conversations that were transmitted from around him. A dense chill was revealed on his elderly face. This Mod was really stubborn. Even at such a time, he was actually still thinking of using clever words to obtain the champion position. This kind of person was really detestable. However, just as Gu Li was feeling troubled in his heart, Xiao Yan's faint joking voice was once again transmitted from afar. Haha, Association Leader Gu Li, since Master Mod has said so and his request is not overboard, from what I see, you can rest assured and let him appraise the elixir. Since he has already said those words in front of everyone, he is also a person who keeps his promises. A smile immediately surged on Mod's face when he heard this. He waved his sleeve and extended his hand toward Gu Li. He laughed and said, ha 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 ha. Association Leader Gu Li, it seems that the chief alchemist of your alchemist association is more reasonable. Since he has already said so, shouldn't you consider handing the elixir over to me? Gu Li was stunned when he heard Xiao Yan's words. After which, he looked at Xiao Yan with a face full of astonishment. He did not expect that Xiao Yan would actually speak up for Mod. Gu Li's heart appeared to have consumed a calming pill when he saw the indifferent smile on Xiao Yan's face. Although he did not quite understand, he still gently nodded. He did not ask any further. Immediately, he once again turned his eyes to Mod and snorted coldly. Humph. Even if I want to give it to you, I won't give it to you. Get out of my way. Gu Li suddenly waved his sleeve. However, he was too lazy to say anything more to Mod. His gaze was cold as he stared directly at Old Demon Who. Mod sneered. His eyes narrowed as he stared at Gu Li. After which, he turned his head to look at Old Demon Who. When the latter felt Mod's gaze, the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. He nodded his head and looked at Gu Li with a smile. Haha, since that is the case, Association Leader Gu Li, you should hand this elixir over to me. If I can guarantee that it is indeed grade complete elixir after my appraisal, Master Mod can only accept it willingly. Ha 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 ha. As his voice faded, Old Devil Who extended his shriveled hand toward Gu Li. His dark skin and sharp nails, in addition to the wrinkles that were filled with age, made the hand in front of Gu Li look just like the claws of a devil. After taking a deep breath, Gu Li looked at Xiao Yan again, hoping that he would take back his words. After all, no matter what method Xiao Yan had, once the Emperor Trial Elixir fell into Old Demon Who's hands, it was inevitable that Old Demon Who would cause some trouble. However, Gu Li did not expect Xiao Yan to smile calmly and nod his head when he saw Gu Li's gaze. He indicated for Gu Li to be at ease. Subsequently, Xiaoyan turned his gaze again and looked at MOD. He laughed loudly. Haha, since Master MOD has invited external help to appraise my elixir, for the sake of fairness, I would like to invite someone to appraise my elixir again. After Xiaoyan said this, MOD's eyes immediately hardened. Old demon who could not help but frown. After exchanging glances with Yan Bing, he instantly looked at a certain spot on the viewing platform. That was where Elder Xian and Luo Jin were. Gu Li's face immediately revealed an unexpected smile when Xiaoyan's words left his mouth. Xiaoyan's body suddenly turned around after his words sounded. He cupped his hands together and cupped them in the direction of Old Xian. At the same time, his mouth suddenly laughed and said, Old Xian, I am the chief alchemist of the Alchemist Association, Yan Xiao. I would like to invite Yunin Pavilion's Elder Xian to appraise my Emperor Elixir. As soon as Xiaoyan finished speaking, everyone's gaze immediately followed Xiaoyan's line of sight. Many people in the arena immediately recognized Elder Xian in the viewing platform. Although Elder Xian had helped Xiaoyan before, the audience thought that he had done so because of Qin Zhong's loyalty. However, judging from Xiaoyan's current attitude, there seemed to be something fishy going on. Opposite Xiaoyan, MOD's expression instantly changed when he heard Xiaoyan's words. Xiaoyan's words earlier were not just inviting Elder Xian. He had even mentioned the Yunin Pavilion. He was not inviting Elder Xian but inviting Yunin Pavilion. At this moment, MOD finally recalled something. When he had just arrived at the ancient Wildlands city, he had personally seen Elder Xian accompany Xiaoyan into the Yunin Pavilion. At that time, the Yunin Pavilion had announced to the public that it was temporarily closed. Now that he thought about it, the situation at that time was probably caused by Yan Xiao. At this moment, even Old Monster whose face could not help but change into a deep grave expression. The deterrence of the Yunin Pavilion was something that even an expert of his level could not compare to. If Elder Xian was really representing Yunin Pavilion, then he would not have the chance to make a move. Xiaoyan would definitely become the champion of this year's Alchemist Grand Meeting. Chapter 231. Haha, since young friend Yan Xiao has said so, this old man will respectfully accept. Actually, this old man also wants to see the Emperor Grade Complete Elixir that young friend has refined. On the spectator stand, Elder Xian revealed a warm smile on his face when he heard Xiaoyan's words. With a chuckle, he flew down from the stage and landed beside Xiaoyan. Haha, I didn't expect young friend Yan Xiao to be able to refine an Emperor Grade Complete Elixir at such a young age. You are really amazing. Today, this old man will have the opportunity to feast my eyes. Ha 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 ha. As soon as he landed, Elder Xian cupped his hands towards Xiaoyan and laughed heartily. Xiaoyan cupped his hands once again when he saw this. Then the two of them looked at Gu Li at the same time. Gu Li was delighted when he saw the two of them acting this way. He knew that Old Monster who was definitely afraid of the Yunin Pavilion's power. As long as Elder Xian came forward to appraise it, Old Monster who would definitely not dare to do anything to him. The three of them looked at each other and smiled. Gu Li's figure, which was standing in the air, slowly descended. The identity that Elder Xian represented was not ordinary. Xiaoyan dared to look down on him, but Gu Li did not have the guts. Even his Alchemist Association could not match the power of the Yunin Pavilion at the border of the continent. When Gu Li's figure landed, Elder Xian immediately looked at Old Monster who. His old eyes narrowed as he smiled and said, Haha, Old Monster who, why don't you go first? In the face of Old Xian's words, Old Devil who immediately shook his head. He took half a step back and laughed dryly with an awkward expression. Let's go with the principle of proximity. Since you're the closest, then, Elder Xian will go first. When Elder Xian heard this, his eyes met with Xiaoyan's for a moment, and he couldn't help but laugh in his heart. Usually, this old monster who could be considered to be quite courageous. But today, in front of the Yunin Pavilion, he was unexpectedly so timid. He was really someone who was bullied by the weak and feared the strong. In that case, this old man will watch first. As soon as he finished speaking, Elder Xian raised his hand and attempted to take the Emperor Tribulation pill from Gu Li's hand. Wait. Elder Xian, since old freak who doesn't dare, then this old man will take a look on behalf of Sea Cloud Palace. Ha! Elder Xian furrowed his brow when he heard Yan Bing's soft acknowledgement. He lifted his head and saw that Yan Bing was already standing in front of him. She had an indifferent look on her face, as if she didn't care about Elder Xian at all. Seeing that Yan Bing had even brought up Sea Cloud Palace, Elder Xian couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He was about to say something, but at this moment, an even more domineering voice descended from the sky like thunder, causing everyone present to be shocked. Sea Cloud Palace, if those old fellows were here, it would be fine. But you alone are not worthy of representing Sea Cloud Palace. An extremely domineering voice sounded, followed by an explosion. The explosion sounded like a meteor falling. In the center of the void square, a storm filled with domineering aura and dust suddenly swept out. When the dust settled, everyone raised their heads and looked over. As far as their eyes could see, the vast void square had already been torn apart. Terrifying cracks spread across the entire square like a spider web. At this moment, in the center of the square, a burly bald old man wearing an alchemist robe was standing. An extremely domineering aura spread out from his body. Anyone who came into contact with it would instantly change their expression. The domineering pressure within the aura was actually not the slightest bit weaker than the pressure of an 8-star half-emperor like Yan Bing. In fact, from a certain point of view, it was even superior. Yan Bing and the rest turned to look at the bald old man. With a single glance, a storm rose in their hearts. They had never expected that this fellow had actually returned to the ancient savage city. It was a long while later before the three of them exclaimed in unison, "Zhou. Compared to the shock of the three of them, Xiao Yan, Gu Li and the others were much calmer. When Elder Xian saw the person who had come, his eyebrows immediately lifted. He was also a little surprised in his heart. Zhou, who had left for many years, had actually returned at this moment. Elder Xian's eyes secretly glanced at Xiao Yan by the side. After which, he looked at the Emperor Tribulation Pill, and involuntarily sneered in his heart. MOD. If you admit defeat now, I will let you walk out of the ancient savage city. Otherwise, if I attack, you can forget about returning." Zhou did not say much. Instead, he turned his eyes and stared at MOD. His overbearing cry caused the entire square to tremble. At the same time, an extremely frightening overbearing pressure instantly pressed down on MOD. MOD's face turned pale as he stared at Zhou. MOD's expression changed drastically as the pressure swept over him. His legs turned to jelly and he directly knelt on the ground. The stone slab beneath him instantly shattered, and his legs were violently embedded into it. His entire body was firmly pressed to the ground, and he was unable to move even a little. Behind MOD, Yan Bing's expression involuntarily changed when she saw that Zhou had directly attacked. Her body moved, and she wanted to charge towards Zhou. However, Zhou coldly snorted and waved his large sleeve. A ray of light immediately shot towards Yan Bing. The latter's expression changed when she saw this. She did not dodge. Instead, she extended her hand and grabbed the light in her palm. When Yan Bing focused her eyes on it, her expression immediately turned solemn. The object that Yan Bing caught was an alchemist badge that was made from a special metal material. This badge looked like a miniature version of a shield. The unique symbol of a rank 3 alchemist was carved on it. At the center of the badge, there was an extremely domineering, tyrant word. This word was Zhou symbol. Seeing the word was like seeing the person. From this badge, one could tell that Zhou current status definitely belonged to the Southern Region Alchemist Alliance that he had mentioned. It was definitely not as simple as an alchemist branch. Yan Bing, this is the badge issued by the Southern Region Alchemist Alliance. I believe that you should recognize it. The moment Zhou words left his mouth, the expressions of everyone in the arena, with the exception of Xiao Yan, immediately changed. Even the expressions of Old Xian and Luo Jin, who was in the viewing gallery, changed slightly. Clearly, these words of Zhou had caused even them to feel extremely surprised, much less Yan Bing, who was currently holding the alchemist badge in her hand. Great waves finally surged in Yan Bing's indifferent heart as she looked at the alchemist badge in her hand. The Alchemist Alliance was the true headquarters of the Pill Tower in the various regions. It was unexpected that Zhou had already reached such a stage. Yet they were actually still dreaming of fighting for the Alchemist Association in this savage ancient city. At this moment, Old Demon, who had completely softened. Now that Zhou had returned in a powerful manner, the outcome had already been decided. The current situation was no longer something that they could control. Ignoring the fact that Xiaoyan had really refined a complete D-tier pill, just the fact that Elder Xian represented the Union Pavilion had already caused MOD and the rest to go all out. At this moment, Zhou had appeared in a domineering manner and intimidated the entire situation by himself. Forget about Yan Bing, who was only a deacon of Sea Cloud Palace. Even if other powerful elders of Sea Cloud Palace were to come, they would still be unable to do anything to Zhou. With the Alchemist Alliance as his backing, it was impossible for Sea Cloud Palace to touch Zhou. Humph. I'll return it to you. Yan Bing coldly snorted. Yan Bing was not a cowardly person. Compared to Old Demon who did not have any backing behind him, he was more confident in his heart. With a wave of his sleeve, Yan Bing threw the badge in his hand back to Zhou. At the same time, the terrifying aura of a peak late-stage 8-star half-martial emperor instantly erupted and helped MOD to cancel out the terrifying domineering aura. With one hand controlling MOD, Yan Bing could not be bothered with Old Demon who. His expression was gloomy as he flew out of the arena. Elder Yan Bing. MOD was naturally unwilling to give up the champion's position. However, Yan Bing's heart was currently filled with rage. Just as he was about to speak, he was immediately blocked by Yan Bing's extremely cold gaze. Compared to Zhou, Yan Bing was the one who made MOD feel more terrified. If he had really angered Yan Bing would never purposely punish him like Zhou did. Given Yan Bing's temperament, he would not hesitate to freeze him in an instant. When Yan Bing turned around and left, his extremely cold gaze swept past Xiaoyan. The killing intent in his eyes was like a raging storm at this moment, causing Xiaoyan to involuntarily have a bad premonition. Noticing Yan Bing's cold gaze, the expressions of Gu Li and Elder Xian beside Xiaoyan changed slightly, after which, they both turned their gazes toward Xiaoyan. Seeing this, the corners of Xiaoyan's mouth curled. He helplessly spread out his hands and said, I also don't know. This is the first time I've seen him. Who knows where his enmity comes from? The two of them helplessly shook their heads when they saw Xiaoyan's helplessness. They could only turn their gazes towards MOD. Currently, other than MOD, there was no one else in this savage ancient city who dared to oppose Xiaoyan. After Yan Bing left with MOD, Old Monster who felt extremely carefree in his heart. However, when he saw that there was a tiger in front of him and a wolf behind him, he felt extremely helpless in his heart. He did not expect that the grand competition, which he originally had absolute confidence in, would end up in such a state. At this moment, Old Monster who had also clearly seen the faction behind Xiaoyan. Currently, Xiaoyan was not alone. He had Gu Li, an 8-star half-martial emperor. Additionally, there was the Union Pavilion, which had yet to appear. Now there was also the Alchemist Alliance's Zhou. The drama in the savage ancient city was becoming increasingly intense. Old Monster who turned around and suddenly looked at Xiaoyan. The expression on his face fluctuated and an extremely obscure glint flashed across his sinister old eyes. Although MOD had given him quite a lot of benefits and this was also the reason why Old Monster who had helped MOD, he also coveted the full-grade Emperor Tribulation pill in Xiaoyan's hands. If he had the means to obtain it, he would definitely not let it go. Old Monster who actually cupped his hands together toward Xiaoyan in front of the stunned gazes of the Xiaoyan trio. The Yan Bing duo, who had already left, naturally did not have the face to see this scene. However, it also caused the spectators in the viewing gallery to involuntarily feel strange. Xiaoyan also looked at the Emperor Tribulation pill in Gu Li's hand with a thoughtful expression. A cold smile involuntarily surfaced in his heart. However, he remained silent on the surface. He shrugged his shoulders and watched Old Monster who turn around and leave. Chapter 232. The departure of the MOD trio naturally meant that this year's Alchemist Grand Meeting had officially come to an end. The farce between the strong practitioners had finally come to an end. Everyone gradually realized that the seemingly calm and peaceful savage ancient city was secretly surging with turbulent undercurrents. Unknowingly, The savage ancient city had already been divided by two large factions. On one side was the Alchemist Association, which belonged to Xiao Yan's faction. Of course, this was merely on the surface. With people like Elder Xian and Zhou Tai, the Alchemist Association's true strength had long surpassed the Alchemist Association of the past. Additionally, with Xiao Yan's terrifying talent in alchemy, the golden signboard of Xiao Yan's Emperor Tier Complete Pill, there would likely be an endless stream of independent alchemists who would come to join the Alchemist Association. At that time, the Alchemist Association's strength in the savage ancient city would be even more terrifying than it was now. After the MOD trio's figures had completely disappeared, Zhou Tai also withdrew his domineering aura. He walked over to Xiao Yan's side and chatted with the three of them. After which, Zhou Tai and Elder Xian once again appraised the Emperor Tribulation Pill in front of the countless number of spectators. This result was naturally within their expectations. After the joint appraisal by the two elders, the Emperor Tribulation Pill that Xiao Yan had refined was undoubtedly an Emperor Tier Complete Pill. If this answer came from Gu Li's mouth, perhaps the spectators would be skeptical. However, after the two super faction representatives, Zhou Tai and Elder Xian, said it, everyone had no choice but to believe it. It was impossible for the Alchemist Alliance and the Union Pavilion to fake it. Even Zhou Tai and Elder Xian could not do so. After all, they were currently representing two factions and not themselves. When this answer sounded once again, it was no surprise that the stadium, which had been completely silent because of Zhou Tai's overbearingness, suddenly erupted into earth-shaking cheers. Compared to MOD, Xiao Yan's victory caused everyone to be even more excited. Immediately, Zhou Tai turned around. With a wave of his large sleeve, an overbearing force swept out, causing the expressions of everyone present to change instantly when they sensed that aura. The stadium from earlier immediately quietened down once again. Haha, I shall not speak any more nonsense with all of you. Now that old fellow MOD has already scrammed. This Emperor Tribulation Pill has also been personally appraised by this old man. In that case, everyone should naturally have an answer in their hearts. This old man will now announce that the champion of this alchemist grand meeting is Yan Xiao. This time around, after Zhou Tai's announcement, a deafening excited roar immediately sounded in the large stadium. Countless numbers of people's faces as they stood up from their seats, waving to the point where their faces flushed red. They waved their hands, waving the things in their hands. For a time, the entire stadium had Yan Zhao's atmosphere. It was no wonder that these people would feel this way. In the alchemist grand meeting in the past, it was basically the alchemists from the ancient savage city who fought for the champion spot. Hence, the hearts of the audience did not feel much hatred for a common enemy. However, this time around, the bet between the two associations had nearly caused Gu Li's group to lose their association. In this way, they had an invisible feeling that they would rather allow the alchemists from their own city to fight until their heads bled in the grand meeting than allow the members of the other associations to strut around here. This was because this ancient savage city belonged to them. The Alchemist Association was something that they had watched grow step by step. The dignity of the ancient savage city's Alchemist Association would definitely not allow an outsider to trample on it. Currently, just as everyone was about to return in disappointment, Xiao Yan had turned the situation around in an instant with the attitude of a strong person. By relying on an Emperor Complete Pill, he had suppressed the situation in the stadium. At this moment, his identity was the chief alchemist of the ancient savage city's Alchemist Association. At this moment, Xiao Yan represented the benefactor of the Alchemist Association, and was also the hero of the ancient savage city. Xiao Yan had saved the Alchemist Association, and protected the association's dignity. At the same time, he had also satisfied the feelings in the hearts of the people in the ancient savage city, who did not wish for their own faction to be invaded by other factions. Now Xiao Yan was not only the savior of the Alchemist Association, he was also a heroic figure to the entire ancient savage city. After this battle, Xiao Yan's name would be completely known in the ancient savage city. At the same time, Xiao Yan would definitely receive the respect of countless people in the ancient savage city. From a certain point of view, the reputation that Xiao Yan had obtained was not solely based on himself. Although the Emperor Complete Pill was not bad, It could only allow Xiao Yan to obtain the champion spot in this grand meeting. At the very most, it could only exchange for some reputation that he could refine Emperor complete pills. When it came to the next alchemist grand meeting, he would similarly be forgotten by others. However, MOD's appearance did not only represent that Xiao Yan had refined an Emperor complete pill. Not only was MOD a veteran rank 2 alchemist, he had also come as a representative of Nanlin City. MOD's eventual failure had further enhanced Xiao Yan's reputation. Even though it could not be engraved in everyone's hearts, at the very least, when the alchemist grand meeting was held in the future, these people would eventually recall the young man called Yan Xiao, who had saved the ancient savage city's alchemist association. A relaxed smile involuntarily surfaced on Xiao Yan's somewhat pale face, as he heard the waves of thundering cheers that were transmitted from around him. His rippleless eyes slowly swept over the entire place. Xiao Yan was not very concerned about his reputation. However, this kind of scene in front of him caused Xiao Yan's heart to involuntarily feel a little joy. After all, there was no one who did not like being worshipped and respected. Xiao Yan was no exception. His calm eyes slowly swept across the place. Finally, Xiao Yan's eyes paused on a jade fan on the viewing platform. More accurately speaking, it should be the owner of the fan. Luo Jin. Their eyes met. The two of them did not exchange any courteous words. All they did was smile in their hearts. After which, Xiao Yan once again turned around. He knew that Luo Jin did not wish to expose himself to the eyes of tens of thousands of people. Otherwise, with the eyesight of these Band D experts present, how could they not recognize him? Haha, alright. We can talk when we return. This is not the place to talk. After the grand meeting is over, these people will leave on their own. Let's also leave. Gu Li also smiled while the few of them chatted. He glanced at the sky and smilingly said to Xiao Yan's group. The few of them nodded upon hearing this. Zhou Tai laughed heartily and took the lead to walk out of the arena. Xiao Yan and the rest also slowly followed behind him. Following the departure of these few people, the alchemist grand meeting, which had been the focus of attention for the past few months, finally slowly came to an end at this moment. Chapter 233. Xiao Yan, Gu Li and the rest were currently standing in a large hall of the Alchemist Guild. As the champion of the Alchemist Grand Meeting and the hero of the Alchemist Guild, Xiao Yan was naturally pushed to the main seat by Gu Li. When the other people present and some of the elders of the Alchemist Guild saw this, they smiled and nodded. In their opinion, given Xiao Yan's current status in the Alchemist Guild, it was reasonable for him to sit there. Haha, not bad. Little brat Yan Xiao, you are able to refine a complete D-tier pill on your first try. Haha, that old brat MOD probably hates you to the core now. Ha ha ha. After everyone took their seats, Zhou Tai immediately laughed out loud. His words were filled with disdain for MOD. When his words rang out, the elders of the Alchemist Guild present also laughed together. One of the elders involuntarily stood up and looked at Zhou Tai. He cupped his hands together and spoke with a heroic expression. Haha, given the strength of the few of you, even if MOD is extremely bold, he will definitely not dare to create trouble. After this elder spoke, the other elders beside him immediately smiled and nodded. From their point of view with Gu Li, Qi Lin, Old Xian and Zhou Tai, the current Alchemist Guild was comparable to some second-rate factions. Even if MOD had Yan Bing and Old Monster who, they were merely 2 8-star half-martial emperors. On the other hand, they had a total of 3 8-star half-martial emperors. Moreover, there was also Zhou Tai and the other members of the Alchemist Alliance present. How could MOD possibly dare to act rashly? However, when Zhou Tai and the rest heard these words, a solemn expression immediately appeared on their faces. When he saw the relaxed expressions of the few elders, he snorted coldly and reprimanded them. Humph! Confidence is a good thing. However, if everyone had the same mindset as you, wouldn't this continent have long been in chaos? Zhou Tai's furious rebuke caused the expressions of the few elders to change. They originally thought that Zhou Tai would praise them with a smile. However, they did not expect that they would end up with such an outcome. Immediately, they hurriedly lowered their heads and carefully listened to every word that Zhou Tai said. This time, I've stayed in the wilderness for 2 more months. This is my limit. I'll leave in a few days, and Elder Xian can't stay in the Alchemist Guild forever. If the two of us leave, who will take charge of this place? The expressions of the few elders immediately became ugly after another merciless reprimand. However, they did not have any reason to refute the former's words. Moreover, they did not have the courage to do so. Zhou Tai's overbearingness and ruthlessness was something that everyone in the ancient savage city knew. If he was truly angry, even Gu Li would not give him any face, much less them. Alright, you guys can leave first. The corners of Zhou Tai's mouth curled. He could not be bothered to say anything more. With a wave of his sleeve, he dismissed the few elders from the Alchemist Guild. When the few elders heard this, even though their positions in the Alchemist Guild were quite high, and even Gu Li had to give in to them, they hurriedly stood up and smiled apologetically when they heard Zhou Tai's words. They did not dare to show the slightest dissatisfaction on their faces, as they swiftly left the hall. When they left, they did not forget to carefully close the door of the hall. When he saw this scene, Zhou Tai sneered and turned his head. With regards to the departure of those few elders, Gu Li and Qi Lin did not say much. These elders were usually a little domineering, but after all, they were the cornerstones of the Alchemist Association. As the president, Gu Li could not say much. Now that they were taught a lesson by Zhou Tai, it was rather to his liking. Old Xian faintly smiled in the face of this. A glint flickered in his eyes, but his eyes never left Xiao Yan. To Elder Xian, the only reason he was sitting here was because of his relationship with Xiao Yan. Although Zhou Tai was now a member of the Alchemist Guild, in Elder Xian's eyes, he was nothing. When it came to management, Xiao Yan was still not good at it. When he saw the few people leave, Xiao Yan directly looked at Zhou Tai and smiled as he spoke. Haha, I did not expect Elder Zhou to still be in the ancient savage city. I thought that you had already left. At this point, Gu Li also turned his gaze with a puzzled expression. In his heart, he was also extremely puzzled. Back then, he had personally seen Zhou Tai leave the ancient savage city. Today, he did not expect that Zhou Tai would still be in the city. Moreover, he had appeared at such a crucial moment. Haha kid, you are right. Logically speaking, I still have some matters to attend to and should have left long ago. However, I heard that Elder Luo had stood up for you. This piqued my curiosity, so I decided to return. However, I did not tell you. Ha 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 ha. But it seems that it was a good thing that I did not tell you. Otherwise, that old brat Mod would really dare to behave atrociously in the ancient savage city. When they heard Zhou Tai's words, the three of them immediately understood. However, when Gu Li looked at Zhou Tai, there was a gloomy expression in his eyes. From time to time, his gaze would also glance at the badge in Zhou Tai's hand that was suffused with a metallic luster. That was the identity badge that the Alchemist Guild had issued to Zhou Tai. The latter also noticed this, and a glint flashed across his eyes. After which, he casually smiled and casually threw the badge towards Gu Li. Gu Li's hand caught the badge that was flying towards him. His face was gloomy as he lifted his eyes to look at Zhou Tai. He bitterly smiled and said, I did not expect that you have already been invited to join the Alchemist Guild. Zhou Tai smiled when he heard this. His eyelids lowered slightly as he nodded. In his heart, he knew that joining the Alchemist Guild was something that Gu Li had been looking forward to for most of his life. It was a pity that his alchemy skills had stopped at rank 2 alchemist. He had not been able to improve for many years. The minimum requirement to join the Alchemist Guild was to be a rank 4 alchemist. If Gu Li could not reach rank 4 in his alchemy skills, he would never be able to join the Alchemist Guild. As for Zhou Tai's invitation, it was not because Zhou Tai wanted to join the Alchemist Guild. It was because his alchemy talent was too terrifying that the Alchemist Guild took the initiative to extend an olive branch to him. When Xiao Yan saw this scene and heard about the Alchemist Guild many times, he could not help but feel curious. He frowned slightly. After hesitating for a moment, Xiao Yan looked at Zhou Tai and asked with a tone filled with curiosity, Senior Zhou, may I ask if the Alchemist Guild you mentioned just now is another faction formed by alchemists? When Xiao Yan's words came out, the expressions of everyone present, including Elder Xian, changed slightly. Their expressions were filled with indescribable astonishment. They looked at Xiao Yan as if they were looking at an alien. The corners of Gu Li's and Qi Lin's mouths twitched intensely. They had once heard Xiao Yan say that he had just left the mountain. Therefore, he was not familiar with the outside world. However, they did not expect him to be completely ignorant of the Alchemist Guild. He was even guessing what kind of faction it was. Elder Xian's eyebrows were tightly knit together at this moment. He did not expect Xiaoyan to not know what kind of faction the Alchemist Guild was. However, if this was the case, then what was going on with the Dou techniques that only the middle region possessed on Xiaoyan? Chapter 234. After a general explanation from Zhou Tai's group, Xiaoyan finally had a general understanding of the somewhat inexplicable Alchemist Alliance. Xiaoyan had originally thought that the Alchemist Alliance should have been established by a certain faction in the southern region. This was because an alliance was usually formed by two or more different factions joining together. For example, the Sky Mansion Alliance on the Douqi continent was formed by many factions working together. However, after hearing Zhou Tai's explanation, Xiaoyan could not help but feel a little surprised. This was because the Alchemist Alliance was actually a faction that belonged to the Pill Tower. Moreover, such an alliance was spread across the various large provinces on the continent. For example, the western region that Xiaoyan was about to head to had an Alchemist Alliance. All the alchemist associations in each province were under the control of the Alchemist Alliance. They were layered over one another. Moreover, the thing that caused Xiaoyan to feel even more surprised was that these alchemist alliances were not only established by the Pill Tower, but they were also personally managed by the Pill Tower. At least half of the upper echelons of the alliance came from the headquarters of the Pill Tower in the middle region. A super faction on the continent would actually disperse its strength to the border of the continent, a desolate and barren place, and establish an insignificant new faction. This indeed caused quite a number of people to feel extremely doubtful in their hearts. On the surface, this kind of action was indeed the Pill Tower expanding its own faction, causing it to become even stronger. This might not appear to be a problem, but if one thought about it, with the Pill Tower's absolute ability to gather people, there was no need for them to use such an action if they really wanted to expand their faction. They could simply use the name of the Pill Tower to gather experts from all over. In this way, it would not be long before an endless stream of experts would take the initiative to join the Pill Tower. After all, no one would reject the invitation of the number one faction on the continent. However, from the current situation of the Alchemist Alliance, it did not appear that they were expanding their faction. On the contrary, they seemed to be guarding it. The Alchemist Alliance was scattered across every province on the continent. Adding the alchemist associations in the various cities, it was like an enormous network of factions that covered the entire Yuanwu continent. Although they had recruited quite a number of alchemists, they were ultimately entrenched in one place. They were not like the other factions that wantonly expanded. Instead, they were continuously gathering their strength, just like a huge hidden dragon. Once this hidden dragon came out of the abyss, it would definitely amaze the world. Besides that, the rules of the Alchemist Alliance were extremely strict as well. Those who could be recruited by the Alchemist Alliance were either extremely strong experts or high-level alchemists. Their recruitment requirements for alchemists caused Xiaoyan to involuntarily inhale a breath of cool air. The Alchemist Alliance's minimum requirement was to be a rank 4 alchemist. An alchemist of this level, placed in the entire province, was a figure who played a pivotal role. However, their lowest requirement was already at this level. One could only imagine how high the standards of recruitment for those experts would be. When he spoke until this point, Xiaoyan naturally could not help but have some doubts about Zhou Tai's words. Since the recruitment criteria of the Alchemist Alliance was so high, with his rank 3 alchemist level, it appeared that he did not meet the requirements regardless of whether it was his strength or alchemist skills. Zhou Tai had already expected this. Logically speaking, with his rank 3 alchemist ability, he did not have the qualification to be recruited by the Alchemist Alliance. However, there was always an exception. As long as one's talent was sufficient, forget about this Pill Tower branch, even the Pill Tower headquarters would be tempted by him. This was the reason why Zhou Tai had been specially recruited by the Alchemist Alliance. It was also because MOD, Yin Bing and the rest were aware of this that they had given in so quickly. After leaving the Alchemist Alliance, Xiaoyan bypassed the congested crowd and chose a more remote path. He lifted his eyes to look at the gradually darkening sky. Xiao Yan's straight body finally relaxed at this moment. Xiao Yan had become the champion of the alchemist's grand meeting. It could be said that he had shocked the world with a single feat, adding the reputation that he had created in this savage ancient city. The front of the Alchemist Alliance was already surrounded by a packed crowd. The entire front hall of the Alchemist Alliance was completely packed. The weakest amongst these people was a quasi-one-star half-emperor. Moreover, there were 30 to 40 elite half-emperors present. This kind of strength was sufficient to contend with some small and medium-sized factions. These people were all from some of the clans and factions in this savage ancient city and the surrounding cities. Normally, they could be considered as factions that could shake a region. Even the Alchemist Alliance had no choice but to give some face to some of them. However, they had all gathered here today with modest smiles on their faces. They were all warm smiles when facing the ordinary elders of the Alchemist Alliance. However, how could those elders not know that these fellows were all here for Xiao Yan? If it was not because Xiao Yan had defeated MOD in the Grand Meeting and refined in D-tier complete pill, these people would not have hurried over in such a hurry. Even more so, they would not have treated them so humbly. However, what they did not know was that while they were blocking the front door in hopes of seeing Xiao Yan, the latter had already quietly left through the back door. It was impossible for them to see Xiao Yan today. Xiao Yan shrugged his shoulders as to how to deal with these fellows. He directly threw this problem to Gu Li and the rest. Gu Li and Qi Lin's hearts were filled with helplessness. However, since Xiao Yan had already left, it was worth it for them to brace themselves. The corner of Xiao Yan's mouth was slowly lifted into a smile as he walked in an empty alley. He extended his hand from under his sleeve. An ancient scroll was quietly lying on his palm. This scroll was the reward that Gu Li had set for this alchemist's grand meeting. This was the D-tier pill formula that Wei Yi should have been the one to refine. However, it had now landed in Xiao Yan's hands. Currently, the D-tier pill formula in Xiao Yan's hands, and the one he had obtained from Heimu added up to a total of 5 scrolls. Although this number was not considered large, it was likely that Gu Li's Alchemist Association had 1/3 of their stock. The Alchemist Association was after all only a branch of the Pill Tower. It was not easy to obtain in D-tier pill formula. Additionally, the other Alchemist Associations were obstructing them, and they coveted each other. Hence, the number of D-tier pill formulas was pitifully small. Hence, it was not unreasonable to say that Xiao Yan had such thoughts in his heart. After recovering, Xiao Yan kept the ancient scroll with one hand. His body moved and he swiftly flew towards the southern part of the city. Currently, Xiao Yan's name had resounded throughout the wilderness. That inn was no longer safe. If Xiao Yan's guess was correct, there was definitely someone waiting for him to take the bait. Hence, other than the 6th floor of the Union Pavilion, the only other place that Xiao Yan could go to in this ancient wilderness city was likely Old Luo's place. In comparison, the natural energy within the ginseng soul world was even richer. For a training maniac like Xiao Yan, it was naturally the best place to go. Once again arriving at this small courtyard, Xiao Yan no longer had the same cautious manner as he did the first time he had come. His body moved, and he took large strides into the courtyard. After entering the small courtyard, a wooden door in the inner courtyard blocked Xiao Yan's path. Even though this was the case, Xiao Yan's footsteps did not pause at all. It was as though he treated it as nothing. When Xiao Yan's body made contact with the door, a circular mysterious energy ripple spread from the door. At the same time, Xiao Yan's body also entered it. Chapter 235. In the sky above a vast dark green mountain forest, the originally calm empty space suddenly spread out circles of water-like energy ripples. An instant later, the empty space once again returned to its original state. A human figure wearing a black robe slowly stepped out from it. Xiao Yan's gaze slowly swept over this jade-green world. The corner of his mouth was involuntarily lifted into a smile. He still clearly remembered the promise he had made to Old Luo before he had left. That was to obtain the champion's spot of the alchemist's grand meeting. Now he had really succeeded. Xiao Yan's figure appeared in the jade-green forest in an instant. At this moment, there was a spacious land in front of him. Xiao Yan saw the 32 spiritual guards that he had met before he had left the last time. These people were the cornerstone of the current spiritual ginseng tribe. They had awoken from their slumber with great difficulty, and had managed to catch He Mu being finished off. It was not easy for Qing Mu to give them a break, and allow them to relax for a while. Due to him having left in a hurry the last time, Xiaoyan did not pay too much attention to them. At this moment, under his investigation, the strength of these 32 spiritual guards caused him to feel that each of them was deep and unfathomable. It was likely that the weakest of these people had reached the Do D class. Xiaoyan involuntarily felt a shock in his heart when he thought of this. At this moment, there were over 30 elite Do D that he had never truly seen in the outside world. If he were to take this lineup out, it was likely that it would be sufficient to sweep through half of the southern region. Xiaoyan sighed in his heart. His eyes slowly moved. There seemed to be a couple of hundred people present. From the looks of it, these people should be the other members of the spiritual ginseng tribe. Moreover, their strengths were all extraordinary. After Xiaoyan's investigation, the weakest person was actually at the Dozun class. This spiritual ginseng tribe could really be said to be strong. Xiaoyan's appearance had also attracted quite a number of gazes. When those people saw Xiaoyan and saw his black robe, they immediately faced each other and began to whisper to each other. Their eyes were filled with curiosity and some doubt when they looked at Xiaoyan. Was this human kid who was only a half-martial emperor really the person who had killed He Mu? When the 32 spirit guards saw Xiaoyan, they raised their eyebrows and looked surprised. They didn't expect that Xiaoyan would come to their spirit ginseng tribe again, after only leaving for 2 months. When Xiaoyan saw the expressions on their faces, he immediately understood what was going on. Other than the incident with He Mu, there was nothing else that could make them look at him with such strange expressions. Xiaoyan sighed softly. Just as he shook his head helplessly, and was about to walk around this group of people, a well-built and handsome young man walked toward Xiaoyan. When Xiaoyan saw the person who had come, he raised his eyes and looked over. Then he was stunned for a moment before a relaxed smile appeared on his face. This man's name was Qingfeng, and he was also one of the 32 spiritual guards. Moreover, he was one of the 3 leaders of the 32 spiritual guards. In the entire spiritual ginseng tribe, he could be considered an important figure. During the 3 days of rest last time, the two of them had become friends. Haha, brother Yin Xiao, we haven't seen each other for 2 months. Your name has spread like wildfire in our spirit ginseng tribe. When the two of them looked at each other, the young man laughed mockingly at Xiaoyan. When the latter heard this, he shook his head with a wry smile and shrugged helplessly. He didn't say anything. Xiaoyan had expected this outcome. No matter how he looked at it, it was a little far-fetched for him to kill a former origin sect expert with the strength of a 3-star half-martial emperor. This man obviously knew that Xiaoyan's purpose for coming here was not to chat with them. Therefore he stopped joking and went straight to the point. Brother Yin Xiao, you've come here to find Elder Luo, right? When Xiaoyan heard this, he nodded and smiled. This was indeed one of the reasons. However, his ultimate purpose for entering the spirit ginseng world was not just to find Elder Luo. Haha, in that case, why don't I lead the way for you? Our spirit ginseng tribe is different from other places. This place is densely covered with spirit trees, and the pressure of heaven and earth is different. Although you're an alchemist, it won't be easy to find Elder Luo here. When Xiaoyan heard this, he smiled faintly at Qingfeng and didn't say anything. Instead, he slowly walked in a certain direction under Qingfeng's slightly puzzled gaze. Qingfeng's words were correct. The spirit ginseng world was indeed different from the outside world. The pressure of countless spirit ginseng trees existed in this world. They supported each other, causing the spirit ginseng world to be filled with an extremely tyrannical pressure. If an ordinary half-martial emperor was here, it would be very difficult for them to do so. However, Xiaoyan was after all an alchemist. His spiritual strength already exceeded that of an ordinary person. Moreover, after refining and swallowing He Mu's spiritual strength, with Xiaoyan's current spiritual strength, there was hardly anyone below a rank 3 alchemist who could compare with him. Therefore, although the spirit ginseng world was special, Xiaoyan could still search within a radius of 1,000 miles. Fortunately, Elder Luo's location was within Xiaoyan's search range. Moreover, under Xiaoyan's search, not only did he discover Elder Luo's existence, he also discovered another person. This caused the corners of Xiao Yan's mouth to curl into a playful smile. When Qing Feng saw Xiao Yan walk around him and walk into the forest, he couldn't help but frown. However, when he noticed the direction Xiao Yan was heading in, his expression instantly changed. This was because Xiao Yan was heading in the direction where Elder Luo was. This fellow. Qing Feng's eyes widened as he stared at Xiao Yan's back. He didn't know what to do for a moment. It was hard to imagine how Xiao Yan could find Elder Luo's location so easily in the spirit ginseng world. Could it be that the cultivators in the outside world were already so powerful? Although he was extremely surprised, Qing Feng's judgment was still a little subjective. The cultivators in the outside world weren't so powerful that it was unimaginable. In fact, most of them were weaker than the spirit ginseng tribe. The reason why Xiao Yan was so powerful could only be attributed to his own hard work. There would only be returns if there was effort. Xiao Yan's strength was directly proportional to the effort he put in. Therefore, it was inevitable that Xiao Yan was powerful. Xiao Yan paused his footsteps while Qing Feng was in a daze. He turned his head around and looked at Qing Feng with a warm smile. Haha, brother Qing Feng. Didn't you say that you would lead the way for me? Why are you standing there? Let's go. After Xiao Yan finished speaking, he turned around and continued walking forward. Qing Feng hesitated for a moment before he shook his head helplessly and hurriedly followed. Chapter 236. At a glance, one could see that there was an ancient quiet wooden house within the lush green ginseng spirit world that entered one's sight. The wooden house was surrounded by a thin green fog. Looking from a distance, the entire wooden house was hidden within the thin fog. It was vaguely visible. Adding the cover of the forest, it caused this entire forest to reveal an extremely mysterious aura. The lush green grass outside of the wooden house caused this place to appear even livelier. A green stone table that was made from natural green stones was accompanied by a couple of cups of tea that had a faint tea fragrance. This allowed one to know that there was actually someone existing in this seemingly desolate forest. An old man wearing linen clothes sat on both sides of the green stone table. The corner of his mouth contained a smile as he lifted a cup of fragrant tea. His skinny finger gently swirled the tea in the cup. His gaze looked at the white-clothed young man opposite him as he opened his mouth and spoke with a smile. Are you prepared to refine that thing? The old man poured the tea in the cup into his mouth as he spoke. His eyes looked steadily at the young man opposite him. The latter smiled faintly when he heard this. His white hand was slowly extended. It was likely that even some women would involuntarily feel envious when they saw his soft skin. However, the old man was indifferent to this. He was old and would not bother about such things. He was only concerned about the future of the young man in front of him. The young man's tender finger rubbed the storage ring on his finger. A glow flashed in his hand in front of the old man's eyes that were filled with surprise. A piece of green-colored emerald-like jade slowly appeared. The old man's turbid eyes in front of the young man immediately brightened the moment the jade appeared. His eyes carried a satisfied expression as he looked at the young man. He nodded and laughed. Not bad at all. A heaven imperial jade essence that is over 3,000 years old. With this, you will be able to break through to the Do D class within 2 years. The young man in front of him nodded slightly after the old man's words sounded. However, the old man frowned in the next moment. His turbid eyes stared at the Heaven Imperial Jade Essence as he asked in a somewhat doubtful manner. What is it? However, from the looks of it, there should still be the Heaven Imperial Demon Flower, right? Yes indeed. However, it has already been refined by Yen Xiao. The young man smiled and opened his mouth after the old man's words sounded. His eyes did not contain any dissatisfaction. One would only be able to obtain more if one was not greedy. Otherwise, if one's eyes were to be blinded by the small profit in front of him, it would be difficult to avoid falling to the word greed in the future. The old man involuntarily laughed when he heard this. His finger played with the teacup in his hand as he softly laughed. Hee, this little fellow is really someone who is unwilling to be at a disadvantage. With a soft chuckle, the old man exchanged glances with the young man in front of him. Then he slowly turned his gaze and looked at the forest that was filled with a thin layer of green fog. I wonder what kind of expression he will be. Come. Leaf. By himself. Ha 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 ha. Xiao Yan's somewhat teasing words were emitted from his mouth the moment he appeared. Old Luo softly reprimanded him when he heard this. He curled his mouth and said, "Stop trying to flatter me. It has only been 2 months. What kind of changes can this old man have? You, on the other hand, have you obtained the champion of the alchemist's grand meeting?" Xiao Yan smiled when he heard this. He gently rubbed the tip of his nose and exchanged glances with the young man beside old Luo. Only then did he open his mouth and laugh. "Hee, old Luo. Is there anything that you do not know about in this ancient wilderness city? Tisich." Old Luo once again laughed and scolded when he heard these words. He was too lazy to be bothered. The young man beside him also slowly stood up at this moment. He had a faint smile on his face as he looked at Xiao Yan, who was also looking at him. "Haha, brother Yin Xiao, how have you been? It is unexpected that we have met at the alchemist's grand meeting. We have met again so quickly." "Haha, indeed. However, this has also confirmed the suspicion in my heart. Brother Luo Jin and old Luo do indeed have a deep relationship." Xiao Yan also had a faint smile on his face. Clearly, he was not surprised by Luo Jin in front of him. In reality, Xiao Yan already had some suspicions in his heart 2 months ago. Old Luo also smiled when he saw the indifferent expression on Xiao Yan's face. Luo Jin's face revealed some surprise. From the looks of it, the Xiao Yan in front of him was much sharper than he had imagined. Xiao Yan once again smiled when he saw the expression on Luo Jin's face. He faced Luo Jin and laughed. The Union Pavilion can be considered a powerful faction in the entire southern region. When I first saw it, I had already sensed that there was a restriction placed by an expert who was not below the Do D class within the Union Pavilion. When I first met you in the Union Pavilion, the strongest guardian of the Union Pavilion was merely an 8-star bandit, Elder Xian. I'm afraid that no one would believe that there were no other experts. Luo Jin involuntarily raised his eyebrows when he spoke until this point. He did not expect that Xiao Yan had already noticed this point from then on. The appearance of old Luo has coincidentally helped me confirm this point. The most important thing is that his surname is also Luo. Although Xiao Yan's words were simple, it was easy to understand. Luo Jin could only helplessly shrug his shoulders. He originally thought that he would be able to surprise Xiao Yan, but he did not expect that Xiao Yan had already guessed it. His appearance today was merely to help Xiao Yan confirm the thoughts in his heart. The three of them casually chatted for a while. Luo Jin did not dwell on this topic for too long. However, he could not help but make some indirect inquiries about Xiao Yan during their casual conversation. He was not like old Luo, who was able to find out about Xiao Yan's background from just a heavy Xian ruler. He had always thought that Xiao Yan should be a disciple of some mysterious faction in the middle region. Otherwise, how did Xiao Yan obtain his high-class Do skills and those mysterious secret techniques that only existed in the middle region? Xiao Yan did not dare to be careless when faced with all this. Forget about Luo Jin. The current old Luo in front of him was not an ordinary person. Of course, Xiao Yan did not know that Luo Ao already knew about his background. He did not know what kind of expression would appear on Xiao Yan's face if Luo Ao were to reveal it in the future. Hee, little fellow, you are now an influential person in the ancient savage city. Look at these people. They have all come from the various factions in the surrounding large cities or clans. They have all come here for you. Old Luo involuntarily shook his head when he saw that Luo Jin was still closely pursuing Xiao Yan and interrogating him. Immediately, he let out a soft laugh from his mouth and interrupted Luo Jin's words that he wanted to continue. At the same time, old Luo waved his sleeves and an invisible pillar shot out. After the empty space in front of the three of them wiggled, a light curtain that was dozens of feet large slowly appeared. At this very moment, the scene in the ancient savage city in the outside world was completely seen by Xiao Yan's group. Seeing this scene, Luo Jin also withdrew his thoughts with some thoughts in his heart. His gaze similarly looked at the enormous light curtain in front of him. Xiao Yan curled his lips in response. He felt quite helpless in his heart. He looked at the black mass of human heads on the light curtain and laughed bitterly. Old Luo, don't make fun of me. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have to hide here. Old Luo involuntarily laughed out loud when he heard this. He did not expect that the champion of this year's Alchemist Grand Meeting would actually be chased by a group of unrelated people, until he had nowhere to hide. It was really laughable. In response, Xiaoyan could only violently roll his eyes at the crowd on the light curtain. Luo Jin also had a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. His gaze casually swept across the light curtain, after which he once again looked at Xiaoyan and laughed. Brother Yan Xiao, now that the alchemist's grand meeting has ended, what plans do you have next? When it came to the main topic, Xiaoyan's expression immediately turned serious. Old Luo smiled as he looked at the two people in front of him. His heart was filled with expectations for the two of them. The two members of the younger generation in front of him could be considered as the true outstanding existences among the younger generation in the entire continent. Luo Jin came from the middle region. Naturally, there was no need to talk about his talent. If he was to focus on his cultivation, given his ability, as long as he was given enough time, there would definitely be a place for him in the future of the continent. As for Xiaoyan, although he was not someone from this continent, given his ability and his frightening cultivation talent, Xiaoyan's future achievements might not be inferior to those disciples from the middle region. When Xiaoyan heard Luo Jin's words, his eyebrows gently lifted. According to his plan, he should directly head to the western region after the alchemist's grand meeting ended. However, although the alchemist's grand meeting had ended, there was still one thing that was on Xiaoyan's mind. Previously, with old Luo's help, I obtained a lightning void pool invitation from the Li family's ancestor. I am also somewhat curious about that so-called lightning void pool. If there is an opportunity this time, I would like to go in and take a look. At the same time, I will also break through to the 4-star half-emperor realm. When Luo Jin heard this, he gently nodded his head. Soon after, he looked at Xiaoyan with a solemn expression and said, Brother Yan Xiao, at that time, don't forget about that despicable MOD. Given that fellow's character, he will not let this matter rest. At that time, you must be extremely careful. When he heard Luo Jin's words, Xiaoyan could not help but frown. There was a slightly strange expression in his eyes. From Luo Jin's words, it seemed that he did not intend to enter the lightning void pool as well. Because my cultivation technique is a little special, the energy within the lightning void pool is not suitable for my cultivation. Therefore, this time, only you will enter the lightning void pool. As if he had seen through Xiaoyan's doubts, Luo Jin did not conceal anything and directly explained the reason to Xiaoyan. Xiaoyan also nodded his head to show that he understood. Different cultivation techniques required different cultivation methods. For example, Xiaoyan's flame mantra required the use of heavenly flames to cultivate. This was something that other cultivation techniques could not achieve. As for MOD and the others, although they were not easy to deal with, when the time came, they would not be the only ones entering the lightning void pool. Gu Li and Qi Lin would also enter. Under the suppression of the two of them, in addition to himself and the Northern King, they should not be able to cause any big waves. Now it is time to refine that portion of Soul Source. Chapter 237. The end of the alchemist's grand meeting had caused Xiaoyan's reputation to soar in the ancient wildlands. Countless people had come to seek an audience with him. Regardless of whether it was in the streets or outside the city, everyone was discussing the champion of the alchemist's grand meeting, the frightening alchemist who had refined in D-tier complete pill, Yan Xiao. The ancient wildlands once again became lively because of this. The entrance of the Alchemist Association was crowded by a group of half-emperors, until not even a drop of water could trickle through. The elders of the association were also greatly shocked by this for the first time in many years. However, Xiaoyan was no longer in the association. Regardless of how long these people waited, they would definitely not be able to see him. Faced with this kind of situation, Gu Li and Qi Lin felt quite helpless in their hearts. Xiaoyan had already left the association for a couple of days. However, these people had been waiting at the entrance of the association for so many days. Although Gu Li had once stepped forward to inform them that Xiaoyan had already left, these fellows still refused to change their minds. Although there was also a portion of them who chose to leave, there were even more who still thought that Gu Li was deceiving them. While Gu Li and the rest were feeling helpless in the outside world, Xiaoyan was currently peacefully training in the ginseng spiritual world. In order to refine the D-tier complete pill during the alchemist's grand meeting, Xiaoyan had put in all his effort. Although he appeared to be in a good condition after the competition, it was only because Xiaoyan had borrowed the strength of the pill. There was no lack of D-tier medicinal pills in the storage ring that He Mu had left behind. However, medicinal pills were ultimately external objects. Although they could support one for a while, they could not be completely relied on. When Xiaoyan entered the ginseng spiritual world, the D-tier medicinal pill in his body had yet to be refined. During these few days, Xiaoyan did not dare to slack off. He had seen the might of the D-tier medicinal pill before. Although he had already consumed the D-tier medicinal pill, he could not allow its power to wantonly spread within his body. Otherwise, the end result would be that the gains would not make up for the losses. After meeting with old Luo and Qi Lin, Xiaoyan wholeheartedly immersed himself in the D-tier medicinal pill in his body. This time, with Xiaoyan taking the initiative to refine it, Xiaoyan's aura once again recovered to its peak in a short few days. At this moment, Xiaoyan had once again touched the bottleneck that was about to break through. Even though this was the case, Xiaoyan still forcibly suppressed the throbbing power within the vortex within his body. A breakthrough was naturally something that would happen sooner or later. In fact, if the current Xiaoyan was willing, he would naturally be able to make a breakthrough. Furthermore, he would definitely be able to step foot into the realm of a 4-star half-martial emperor. However, this was not the only result that Xiaoyan wanted. Although the natural energy within the ginseng spiritual world was very dense, the effect of a breakthrough was not able to allow Xiaoyan's power to rapidly condense. This was something that the lightning pool in the void was capable of accomplishing. The berserk lightning energy contained within the lightning pool in the void was capable of rapidly condensing the Do Qi within Xiaoyan's body in the shortest amount of time. In this way, after Xiaoyan made a breakthrough, his strength would completely stabilize at the realm of a 4-star half-martial emperor. This would also bring about countless benefits to Xiaoyan's future cultivation. Rather than rushing to make a breakthrough right now and causing his strength to be unstable, it would be better to wait for a period of time. Strength and foundation were the most important things. A powerful appearance would not allow one to surpass others. After all, even among experts of the same level, there were still differences in strength. For example, Xiaoyan and Mod. Weren't they the clearest examples of this? Ho! Xiaoyan exhaled a mouthful of turbid air that was tightly held in his chest. He slowly withdrew from his cultivation state. As he sensed the churning Do Qi within his body, Xiaoyan involuntarily frowned. This was a sign of a breakthrough that would cause anyone to be pleasantly surprised. However, at this moment, it was something that Xiaoyan was most unwilling to see. A thought passed through Xiaoyan's mind and he slowly suppressed the unusual condition within his body. After calming his heart for a moment, he finally slowly extended his hand. His white palm reflected a warm jade-like glow under the sunlight. The dark black storage ring on his finger appeared exceptionally eye-catching at this moment. Xiaoyan inhaled a deep breath of air. A thought once again passed through his mind. He gently clenched his hand and a light flashed. Immediately, a thin jade bottle appeared in Xiaoyan's hand. The thing within this bottle was the spiritual origin energy that Guyu had extracted from Qing Mu. Although Xiaoyan was temporarily unable to raise his Do Qi, he would first focus his mind on his spiritual strength. With Xiaoyan's current spiritual strength, if he were to wait until he had refined and swallowed these spiritual essences, his spiritual strength might really be comparable to that of a rank 3 alchemist. Xiaoyan still clearly remembered that when he had just entered the Alchemist Association to take the alchemist test, Guli had told him that the spiritual strength of an alchemist was divided into the man and god stages. Xiaoyan's current spiritual strength was between the man stage and the god stage, the emperor stage. After the emperor stage was the unity stage. In order to reach this stage, one needed to completely agglomerate one's spiritual strength. Only by agglomerating it into a soul bead could one be considered to have reached the level of a rank 3 alchemist. Xiaoyan opened the jade bottle, and the cream-white spiritual origin within it slowly drifted out. He exerted some force with his palm, and an invisible force controlled the spiritual origin in his palm. The faint cream-white spiritual origin was just like a cluster of fog as it continued to churn in Xiaoyan's palm. Xiaoyan involuntarily frowned as he sensed the familiar aura within it. A feeling of reluctance rose in his heart. This spiritual origin should not have been refined by Xiaoyan. If Guyu had not secretly attacked Xiaoyan without his knowledge, Xiaoyan would not have allowed Qingmu to be injured. Yet, the spiritual origin that should have belonged to Qingmu had landed in his hands. Speaking of which, given the relationship between Xiaoyan and Elder Luo, he could be considered acquainted with the ginseng spirit tribe. His current actions were a little heartless. Hee, stinking brat, why are you feeling a little unbearable now? Why didn't you say so earlier? Otherwise you could have returned it to Qingmu back then. Haha. Guyu did not forget to tease Xiaoyan while he was feeling disappointed. Xiaoyan felt helpless in his heart. Qingmu was currently in a retreat. Even if he wanted to return it, what could he do? Did he have to wait for Qingmu to exit his retreat before returning it to him? Moreover, even if Qingmu could exit his retreat now, it was impossible for him to return it to him. Knowing that there was a terrifying existence like Guyu within Xiaoyan's body, Qingmu would definitely not take back his spiritual origin. Hence, from the looks of it, Xiaoyan could only take the spiritual origin and treat it as a favor. If there was an opportunity in the future, Xiaoyan would definitely return it 100-fold. Don't think too much about it. Well, don't think too much. If you really want to help them, you can help them when you have the strength. Although they look good now, they're just on the border of the continent. What you've seen is too little. If you really want to remember this favor, you should practice hard. When you become successful in the future, you can let the ginseng tribe settle in the central region openly. In this way, you won't disappoint Greenwood's expectation of you. Xiaoyan involuntarily frowned when he heard Guyu's words. Guyu's words clearly had a hidden meaning. It seemed as though Qingmu had a motive for giving his spiritual origin to him. Guyu seemed to have seen through Xiaoyan's doubts. He laughed softly and said, "You are so experienced. Do you really think that Qingmu gave his spiritual origin to you because of me? Although it is true that my body is a heavenly flame, and it is a natural counter to him, I have no reason to attack him. The reason he gave his spiritual origin to you is because he has taken a fancy to your talent. You have the spirit of mystical fire and such a terrifying force by your side. For the sake of the entire spiritual ginseng tribe, it's worth it for him to spend some of his soul origin. Greenwood has entrusted the future of the spiritual ginseng tribe to you." Chapter 238. Xiaoyan was seated cross-legged on a green rock within the ginseng spiritual world. Both of his eyes were tightly shut as his mind observed the interior of his body. On the surface, Xiaoyan appeared as though he was training. However, at this moment, there was a frightening spiritual strength churning within his body like a monstrous wave. Xiaoyan did not expect the spiritual strength contained within this cluster of spiritual essence of Qingmu to be so frightening. It was much stronger than the spiritual strength that Xiaoyan had used to refine and swallow He Mu. Although He Mu was once an expert from the Origin sect at his peak, his spiritual strength had long been worn down by the passage of time until there was little left. There was indeed a gap when compared to Qingmu. However, this was considered an unexpected joy for Xiaoyan. After refining He Mu's soul fragment, Xiaoyan's spiritual strength had soared. Currently, there were very few alchemists of the same level who could compare with him in terms of spiritual strength. If he swallowed these spiritual essences, would Xiaoyan's spiritual strength be able to take the opportunity to make a breakthrough? Xiaoyan calmed his mind and carefully sensed the cluster of spiritual essence within the vortex within his body. A thought passed through his mind, and a cluster of brilliant heavenly flames rose from within his body, slowly wrapping around the spiritual essence. The spiritual essence seemed to have sensed something when it was being wrapped around. The cloud-like milky white spiritual essence swiftly churned under the wrapping of the heavenly flames, as though it wanted to find a breakthrough point within the heavenly flames. However, the heavenly flame had completely enveloped it. After a long while it was to no avail. This ball of soul origin could only curl up like a little squirrel. In an instant, the originally fist-sized milky white spiritual essence swiftly shrunk. Although it had become a little smaller, Xiaoyan could sense that the strength within the spiritual essence had also become increasingly agglomerated. This caused Xiaoyan to involuntarily raise his eyebrows. Indeed, the agglomeration of spiritual strength could allow one to become even stronger. Although its appearance was not as good as before, the strength contained within far surpassed what it was before. No wonder alchemists can agglomerate something like a soul bead. Looks like they have refined spiritual strength like Do Qi. Xiaoyan could not help but feel a little surprised when he saw this scene. He smiled in his heart and ignored it. No matter what, no matter how agglomerated the spiritual essence was, it was destined to be refined by Xiaoyan today. Trainings times spiritual essence. One needed to be careful. In the blink of an eye, 3 days. Fist-sized spiritual essence within Xiaoyan's body was gradually refined. At the same time, Xiaoyan's spiritual strength had also become increasingly powerful. The majestic spiritual strength was just like an ocean. The turbulent spiritual waves churned unceasingly within Xiaoyan's body. In addition to his similarly full Do Qi, Xiaoyan had difficulty suppressing the increasingly powerful strength within his body in an instant. At this moment, Xiaoyan's brows were tightly knit together. He did not expect that the increase in his spiritual strength this time around would actually trigger the Do Qi within his body. If this continued, it was likely that he would have no choice but to break through today. At this moment, Xiaoyan was just like a balloon that was filled to the brim. The most frightening thing was that this balloon was still expanding. The result of the expansion of the balloon would naturally be an explosion. Although this result would not cause Xiaoyan to die, it was also not something that Xiaoyan wished to see. The method to stop the balloon from continuing to expand was to release a portion of the air within it. Buzz! Suddenly, the originally tightly shut eyes of Xiaoyan, who was seated cross-legged on the green rock, suddenly opened. The instant he opened his eyes, the Do Qi within Xiaoyan's body seemed to have found an outlet. 2 eye-piercing Do Qi light pillars suddenly shot out from Xiaoyan's eyes and entered the empty space in front of Xiaoyan. After the light pillars disappeared, Xiaoyan appeared to feel that it was not enough. He raised his head toward the sky. A thought passed through his mind, and the Do Qi within the vortex within his body suddenly whizzed out like a wild horse that had escaped its reins. It swiftly surged toward Xiaoyan's throat. Immediately, Xiaoyan widened his mouth. Light shot out in all directions from his mouth. 1,000-foot-wide terrifying Do Qi light pillar shot toward the empty space that was hundreds of thousands of feet high. Such a frightening momentum naturally alarmed quite a number of people within the spiritual ginseng world. When those spiritual ginseng tribe members raised their heads to look at the empty space, they only saw a frightening Do Qi light pillar charging toward the sky with an unstoppable force. It shattered the empty space and finally entered the endless empty space. Seeing this scene, a portion of the spiritual ginseng tribe members, who were at the Ban Emperor level, involuntarily felt a sense of surprise. Just as they were about to step forward to take a look out of curiosity, a cry descended from the sky. It was like thunder that reverberated through the world. A group of little brats. It is merely training a Do skill. What is there to see? All of you withdraw. Although these spiritual ginseng tribe members were unwilling in their hearts, they had no choice but to obey old Luo's voice when they heard it. As for those stronger spiritual ginseng tribe members, their eyes narrowed as they looked at the rainbow-like pillar that reached the sky. They began to ponder in their hearts. In the sky, old Luo also narrowed his eyes as he looked at the frightening Do Qi light pillar in front of him. A pair of turbid old eyes revealed a deep surprise. An attack of this degree was naturally nothing to him. However, if it was placed among the Ban Emperors, it could be considered an extremely frightening existence. Tisk, this little fellow. No wonder he is able to cross 2 stars in strength and fight head-on with a 6-star Ban Emperor. The degree of agility of his Do Qi is likely something that even the me from back then could not compare with. At this moment, even old Luo involuntarily exclaimed at Xiaoyan's strength. On the other hand, Xiaoyan had already once again immersed himself in the nervous refinement process. Seeing the Do Qi light pillar in front of him gradually disappear, old Luo finally turned his gaze to Xiaoyan below. After sensing the majestic Do Qi within the latter's body, old Luo involuntarily frowned. Based on Xiaoyan's current situation, it was obvious that he was on the verge of a breakthrough. However, he was still suppressing the turbulent Do Qi within his body. It was clear that he was unwilling to break through. Hey, this little fellow is really an anomaly in the training world. Other people are always looking forward to a breakthrough. Once they touch the barrier that is about to break through, who would not do their best to break through? Yet, you are actually forcefully suppressing yourself and not allowing yourself to break through. If news of this were to spread, I wonder just how many people would want to have a good chat with you. Sensing the current situation within Xiao Yan's body, old Luo involuntarily raised his eyebrows. He felt a little surprised in his heart. However, he understood in an instant. With old Luo's shrewdness, he was naturally able to tell that the reason why Xiao Yan was not in a hurry to break through was because he wished to find an excellent training ground. This would allow him to completely consolidate his strength while breaking through. Needless to say, old Luo was immediately able to guess that the training ground was naturally the lightning pool in the empty space. That was right. However, from the looks of it, this little fellow should be refining the spiritual essence. Hey, what a lucky little fellow. While old Luo probed the turbulent Do Qi within Xiao Yan's body, the spiritual essence strength that was being refined by Xiao Yan was naturally also detected by old Luo. However, the almost non-existent aura on it caused him to be unable to detect that it was Qing Mu's spiritual essence strength. Time passed by. In the blink of an eye, it had already been 5 days since Xiao Yan began to refine the spiritual essence. Xiao Yan's spiritual strength was also soaring at a speed that was extremely frightening in the eyes of an ordinary person. With the current Xiao Yan's spiritual strength, he could be said to be invincible among Tier 2 alchemists. Who? After the final wisp of spiritual essence was completely refined and absorbed by Xiao Yan's dark black eyes, which had been tightly shut for 5 days, were also slowly opened. The instant Xiao Yan opened his eyes, an invisible arrow was suddenly shot out from his deep eyes. An invisible strength whizzed out, and the empty space in front of Xiao Yan instantly became distorted. Immediately, an invisible force shot out in front of Xiao Yan like a cannonball that had been shot out explosively following a muffled bang sound. Wherever it passed, a gully that was dozens of feet deep was formed on the lush green ground by its terrifying force. Soon after, a mountain rock 1,000 feet away from Xiao Yan suddenly burst apart. Rock fragments flew everywhere, and an extremely dangerous crack line was forcefully formed on the entire mountain by this attack. Xiao Yan was not surprised when he saw this scene. The strength of one's spiritual strength was similar to that of Do Qi. It was just that it was a little troublesome to train. With Xiao Yan's current spiritual strength, it was likely that he could easily face an ordinary 3-star half-emperor if he were to use it in a fight. Hence, this little activity in front of him was indeed nothing much. Not bad. Your current spiritual strength has already reached the peak of the advanced D state spiritual strength. You are merely 1 step away from the perfect D state. This level of spiritual strength is sufficient for you to defeat other alchemists of the same level. The increase in Xiao Yan's strength caused Guyu, who was within his body, to sigh in admiration. Unexpectedly, not only was Xiao Yan not killed by He Mu during their trip to the spirit world, but he had also benefited from the disaster. Not only had his strength reached the peak of the advanced 3-star half-emperor level, but his spiritual strength had also reached the advanced D state level. He was only 1 step away from the perfect D state. This frightening growth speed caused even Guyu to involuntarily sigh in amazement. Xiao Yan narrowed his eyes in the face of this. The expression on his face quietly changed. The hand under his sleeves also slowly tightened. After which, he once again slowly opened it. A determined expression flashed across the deep region of his eyes. He paused for a moment before muttering softly in his mouth. Advanced D state, huh? I wonder if I can successfully form a soul bead. Chapter 239. After resting for a moment, Xiao Yan, who had finished refining the spiritual essence, should have stood up. However, he rolled his bright eyes and calmed his mind. After which he once again entered his training mode. A thought passed through his mind, and the majestic ocean-like spiritual strength between his brows suddenly moved at this moment. Guyu involuntarily exclaimed in surprise when he sensed the change in Xiao Yan's body. It was unexpected that Xiao Yan would be so bold. His spiritual strength had just reached the advanced DD stage. Yet he wanted to attempt to form a soul bead. Guyu did not know whether he was reckless or courageous. Although Xiao Yan's strength would soar after forming a soul bead, the danger involved was not something that an ordinary person could endure. Even with Guyu's experience, this was the first time he had seen someone forcefully forming a soul bead with an advanced DD stage spiritual strength. Condensing a soul bead was easier said than done. It was just condensing one's spiritual energy into a bead. However, the pressure one had to endure during the process was definitely not as simple as it sounded. The formation of a soul bead not only tested an alchemist's spiritual strength, but it also tested the alchemist's intelligence. During the process of forming a soul bead, a powerful spiritual strength was no longer something an alchemist could rely on. Only an unwavering and tenacious mind could support the formation of a soul bead until the end. It was also because of this that many Rank 2 high-grade alchemists were unable to form a soul bead and break through the barrier to become a Rank 3 alchemist. One's spiritual strength could be trained and raised, but one's intelligence could only rely on one's own heart. Only with a strong heart would one be able to guarantee the agglomeration of a soul bead. This could also be considered as a kind of test for the strong. After all, those who were able to endure the pain of agglomeration of a soul bead and successfully advance to the next level, which one of them was not a person with a strong heart and powerful strength? Xiaoyan calmed his heart and slowly maneuvered the spiritual strength in his sea of consciousness. The method of forming a soul bead was not difficult. Although this was the first time, Xiaoyan could be considered familiar with it. As an alchemist, controlling spiritual strength was an extremely easy task for him. What Xiaoyan needed to do now was to guide the spiritual strength in his sea of consciousness, and use a special method to form it. Once all the spiritual strength in Xiaoyan's sea of consciousness was completely formed and turned into a physical state, the formation of a soul bead would be complete. As Xiaoyan's thoughts revolved, the majestic spiritual strength in his sea of consciousness also began to churn. After which, under Xiaoyan's control, the surging spiritual strength began to slowly rotate in his sea of consciousness. Threads of spiritual strength were gradually extracted under Xiaoyan's control. Soon after, they were like two small snakes that intertwined with each other. The first step of forming the soul bead could be considered the easiest step. It did not take Xiaoyan too much time, and he easily condensed the two clusters of spiritual strength together. The following steps were basically the same. However, as the spiritual strength continued to condense and compress, the spiritual strength within the soul bead in front of Xiaoyan also rapidly increased. Before the soul bead was completely formed, all the spiritual strength that Xiaoyan possessed would become his greatest burden. The terrifying spiritual strength would crush his consciousness. If he was unable to endure, the worst outcome would be that his spiritual strength would be injured. As the spiritual strength gradually condensed, a grayish-white soul bead slowly formed within Xiaoyan's sea of consciousness. At this moment, Xiaoyan could also clearly feel the terrifying spiritual strength that was being emitted from the soul bead. This kind of spiritual strength was definitely not a terrifying level that Xiaoyan could reach in the past. At this moment, Xiaoyan felt as though he was carrying a majestic Mount Tai on his back. Every part of his body was enduring the terrifying spiritual strength. The muscles all over his body were as taut as steel, and every cell in his body was resisting the spiritual strength with all their might. As time passed, a soreness akin to being bitten by ants attacked his entire body. Xiaoyan felt as though all the bones in his body were about to fall apart. The spiritual strength within his sea of consciousness continued to flow out, and was completely poured into the grayish-white soul bead. Xiaoyan's consciousness also gradually became a little blurry. Before the soul bead was formed, his spiritual strength could no longer be used by him. Usually, Xiaoyan could rely on his powerful spiritual strength to maintain his consciousness. However, at this moment, he could only rely on his own willpower. Within his sea of consciousness, the body that Xiaoyan had created using his spiritual strength gradually dissipated and transformed into wisps of spiritual strength that flowed into the soul bead. The terrifying spiritual strength around Xiaoyan's body also became increasingly terrifying as it relied on the soul bead. Buzz! Suddenly the grayish-white soul bead, which was the size of a basketball, trembled violently. Immediately, a formless and terrifying spiritual strength instantly crushed towards Xiaoyan. Xiaoyan had no way of dodging. He knew that if he wanted to successfully form the soul bead, he had to endure this attack. Otherwise, all his previous efforts would be wasted. The terrifying spiritual strength caused Xiaoyan's previously groggy mind to instantly regain its clarity. At this moment, Xiaoyan's heart was extremely helpless. He never imagined that there would be a day where he would actually be crushed by the spiritual strength that he had always been so proud of. Perhaps the essence of forming the soul bead was for the alchemist to understand that if he wanted to defeat others, he had to defeat himself first. For a true strong practitioner, the strength of his opponent would only excite him. Only when he was unable to surpass himself would he feel fear in his heart. When Xiaoyan thought of this in his heart, the spiritual strength that originally belonged to Xiaoyan was already surging towards him with a terrifying spiritual strength that could crush everything. Even if Xiaoyan was at his peak condition and attacked with all his spiritual strength, it would still be difficult for him to match up against that kind of power. When that spiritual strength arrived in front of him, even with Xiaoyan's temperament, he could not help but feel a chill in his heart. However, before he could do anything, that terrifying spiritual strength that was filled with an aura of destruction ruthlessly pressed down on him like a storm. In an instant, Xiaoyan's expression abruptly changed. His illusory body exploded with a bang. Under that terrifying spiritual strength, his willpower that he thought was firm was actually unable to withstand a single blow. His mind was on the verge of collapse. Xiaoyan unwillingly let out a hoarse roar from the bottom of his heart. Painful fresh blood seemed to be about to spurt out from his throat. The feeling of his entire body being crushed made Xiaoyan truly experience the aura of death. At this moment, Xiaoyan was already suffocating. He felt that his body was no longer listening to his commands. His spiritual strength had disappeared, and he was only left with a body that was like a walking corpse. Death had already forced its way into his heart. Sigh, this kid is really reckless. Buzz, after an elderly sigh, a regretful voice sounded from the bottom of Xiaoyan's heart. Suddenly, a majestic spiritual strength crazily surged into his body. The spiritual strength emitted by the soul bead was blocked for an instant. During this instant, Xiaoyan's collapsed mind was once again filled with life. Although I can save you for now, I cannot protect you forever. Whether you succeed or not will depend on yourself. Xiaoyan's mind suddenly braced the moment the spiritual pressure was blocked. Xiaoyan felt his body suddenly become lighter. The pressure all over his body had been removed. Guyu's voice was vaguely transmitted over while Xiaoyan was feeling surprised in his heart. Xiaoyan immediately reacted in his heart upon hearing this. From the looks of it, Guyu had helped him again. If it was not for Guyu, Xiaoyan was unable to imagine just what kind of ending would have happened. Xiaoyan quietly thanked Guyu in his heart. He was also aware that this was not the time to express his gratitude. Immediately, he placed all his attention on the soul bead in front of him. Next, as long as he could stabilize his mind and endure until the end, the soul bead would be formed. Chapter 240. Buzz. As the soul bead trembled violently once again, a spiritual pressure that was even more frightening than the previous few times ruthlessly attacked Xiaoyan. At this moment, Xiaoyan's originally illusory body had become much fainter. In the face of the soul bead's repeated attacks, Xiaoyan could only painfully endure. This was a form of mental destruction. The fact that Xiaoyan was able to endure until now was enough to show that his willpower was extraordinary. As time passed, Xiaoyan, who was repeatedly crushed, seemed to have gradually become numb under the frightening pressure. When the spiritual pressure attacked, Xiaoyan revealed an expressionless face and allowed the pressure to crush him. Since he was unable to resist, he might as well endure it. He would treat the repeated beatings as a form of training and train in pain. Xiaoyan firmly believed that there would be a moment when he would be able to completely ignore the pressure emitted by the soul bead. Buzz. Buzz. The soul bead also seemed to have noticed that something was wrong with Xiaoyan. In the face of repeated attacks, Xiaoyan no longer stubbornly resisted. Instead, he displayed an indifferent attitude. His originally illusory and transparent body actually became increasingly solid with each attack. As the spiritual pressure became increasingly violent, even Xiaoyan's physical body involuntarily trembled. Buzz buzz, the soul bead's trembling became increasingly intense. Wave after wave of majestic spiritual strength swept out in a mighty manner, and once again crushed Xiaoyan's body. Before the first wave subsided, another wave rose. Before Xiaoyan's shattered body could be completely pieced together, another wave of frightening spiritual pressure swept over. Bang! Finally, the vast and mighty spiritual pressure suddenly shook. It seemed to have collided with a wall. At a closer look, a solid white hand was thrown forward and forcefully blocked the spiritual pressure that was heading toward him. When the two came into contact, an even more frightening spiritual storm instantly swept out from within Xiaoyan's body. It passed through Xiaoyan's body and caused the green rock that Xiaoyan was sitting on to instantly turn into a pile of powder. The ground within 1,000 feet around him suddenly cracked and formed numerous large spiderweb-like crack lines. In that case, it ends here. After a calm voice drifted out, Xiaoyan's shattered body finally solidified once again. At the same time, his right hand, which had not been lifted, was suddenly clenched into a fist. Without any hesitation, Xiaoyan threw a punch forward without the help of Douqi or spiritual strength, and violently smashed into the invisible spiritual pressure in front of him. 8. Ultimate Blast. A stern cry that originated from his soul was emitted. Xiaoyan finally erupted completely. He did not have the support of Douqi, but the might of this punch was even more frightening than when he used Douqi at his peak condition. The spiritual pressure around Xiaoyan's body suddenly shattered when this punch was thrown forward. His steel-like fist carried a frightening storm that tore through the empty space as it violently smashed into the spiritual pressure in front of him. Bang! When this punch was thrown, an unstoppable force poured out. The entire sea of consciousness had become completely silent at this moment. In the outside world, Xiaoyan's body suddenly trembled. The ground within a couple of feet from where Xiaoyan was sitting suddenly collapsed. An enormous pit also appeared. At this moment, the space in front of Xiaoyan seemed to have suddenly solidified. The spiritual bead also stopped reacting. Xiaoyan suddenly moved and grabbed the spiritual bead. The soul bead also seemed to have recovered. After the soul bead, which had already turned into a deep gray color, trembled intensely, waves after waves of frightening spiritual pressure suddenly swept out. At this moment, the soul bead seemed to have sensed a dangerous aura. It had only heard of a spiritual bead suppressing an alchemist. Why was it being suppressed by Xiaoyan, an alchemist? All the normal trajectories seemed to have suddenly changed in front of Xiaoyan. It was just like a train turning onto a main road, or an airplane flying across a subway line. Even Guyu, who was within Xiaoyan's body, involuntarily revealed a stunned expression at this moment. This scene was something that he had never imagined. Bang! Octane blast. Although the spiritual pressure emitted by the spiritual bead was extremely frightening, Xiaoyan remained expressionless. He allowed the spiritual pressure to descend on him, after which both of his fists were tightly clenched. Punch after punch was thrown explosively. Bang! 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 Octane blast. Explode. One punch, one step. Xiaoyan took 10 steps forward and threw 10 punches. His footsteps did not pause. By the time Xiaoyan arrived in front of the spiritual bead, he had already thrown an unknown number of punches. Finally, Xiaoyan let out an explosive cry, and an earth-shaking explosion was suddenly emitted from behind Xiaoyan. Xiaoyan's eyes were extremely calm as he looked at the spiritual bead in front of him. Next, all he needed to do was to compress the spiritual strength within the spiritual bead once again until the spiritual bead completely solidified. Only then would it be considered a success. Currently, the most difficult part had already been passed. Xiaoyan was completely confident that he would be able to successfully form the spiritual bead. As long as nothing unexpected happened during the process, he would definitely be able to successfully form the spiritual bead. Excitement involuntarily surged into Xiaoyan's heart when he thought of the feeling of advancing to a rank 3 alchemist. He ceased hesitating and immediately sat down to prepare for the subsequent condensation process. However, Guyu's elderly voice was suddenly transmitted over at this moment. "Brat, are you certain that you want to form the spiritual bead now? You should understand that the embryonic form of the spiritual bead has already been formed. It will not be too late for you to refine it in the future. However, if you are in a hurry to refine the spiritual bead now, it is likely that there will be a high chance of failure." Xiaoyan was startled when Guyu's words left his mouth. Now that the embryonic form of the spiritual bead had been formed, the next step was to completely refine it. Everything seemed to be going extremely smoothly. It was obvious that the spiritual bead was about to be formed. Could it be that there was still a loophole? "Old Gu, may I know what you mean by this?" Your current spiritual strength has only just advanced to the advanced D state. Although I have never seen anyone who can refine a spiritual bead at the advanced D state, given the old me's experience, I think that the chances of success will not exceed 30%. Xiaoyan immediately understood after hearing these words. Guyu was right. Using an advanced D-state spiritual strength to form a spiritual bead was like using an initial 9-star dosheng to forcefully break through to the Bandi realm. Regardless of how frightening one's training talent was, the gap between one's strength could not be made up for. Otherwise, those training geniuses who were born with great talent would not need to put in any effort. They could simply dominate the continent. Guyu's words had undoubtedly pierced Xiaoyan's heart, which was filled with confidence. In other words, this spiritual bead could only remain as it was. After all, the consequences of failing to refine a spiritual bead was something that even Xiaoyan would not be able to endure. On the other hand, Xiaoyan felt some anticipation in his heart. He could not wait any longer. Spiritual bead. This was the first spiritual strength connection that Xiaoyan had come into contact with after coming to the Yuanwu continent. He did not wish to give up so easily. If there was a chance of successfully refining a spiritual bead, even if there was only a 30% chance, Xiaoyan would definitely not give up so easily. Xiaoyan was quiet for a moment before he finally nodded with a grave expression. Both of his eyes revealed a determined expression. Soon after, a determined smile surfaced on the corner of his mouth. He laughed at Guyu in his heart. Since old Gu has never seen anyone who can refine a spiritual bead with an advanced D-state spiritual strength, allow me to give it a try today. In any case, I have already eaten quite a number of crabs. One more will not make a difference. At the very most, my soul will be injured. Chapter 241. Bang! A wild, ferocious, overbearing spiritual strength began to wreak havoc within Xiaoyan's body. The originally stable situation had actually suddenly reversed within a short moment. The spiritual bead within Xiaoyan's sea of consciousness began to violently rebel at this moment. The spiritual strength, which had originally gathered together, began to wantonly spread. The majestic spiritual strength uncontrollably spread. It passed through Xiaoyan's body and swiftly spread throughout the ginseng soul world. Xiaoyan was involuntarily caught off guard by this scene. It was unexpected that this spiritual bead would immediately become violent just because there was a slight deviation. If he were to allow this spiritual strength to continue spreading, it was likely that his spiritual essence would suffer an unprecedented injury. Even Guyu was helpless in the face of this. Although he was quite strong, he was still helpless in the face of the situation that was happening to Xiaoyan. When the turbulent spiritual strength turned into wave after wave of frightening storm that swept through the ginseng soul world, the members of the ginseng tribe swiftly sensed it. They sensed the situation on this side, and immediately gathered their attention. However, after they sensed the frightening pressure within the spiritual storm, other than a small portion of them, the remaining people, who did not possess the strength of a Do-di, had grave expressions as they watched the invisible storm sweep over the countless number of ginseng trees. This seems to be the aura of that human brat called Yin Xiao. What a powerful spiritual strength. With a spiritual strength of this level, it is likely that his strength has already reached the Do-di class. Go away, what human brat? Is that kind of title something that we can use? He killed Heimu by himself. As the saying goes, the one who reaches first becomes the teacher. Don't always look at the strength of others on the surface. Currently, our entire ginseng tribe owes him a great favor. Quite a number of people feel great respect for Elder Yin Xiao in their hearts. If someone were to hear you speak of him in this manner, won't they join forces to beat you up? The member of the ginseng tribe, who had spoken earlier, hurriedly shut his mouth after these words were spoken. He secretly glanced around with a lingering fear in his heart. He only sighed in relief after discovering that no one had noticed him. At this moment, the terrifying spiritual storm descended upon their heads with an unparalleled pressure. All the members of the spirit participating tribe, whose strength had yet to reach the Do-di class, were pressed to the ground with flushed faces the moment the pressure descended. Other than a small number of people with stronger spiritual strengths who were barely able to support their bodies, only those experts from the spirit participating tribe, whose strength had reached the Do-di class remained. However, at this moment, even with their strength, their faces involuntarily revealed a deep grave expression in the face of the frightening spiritual pressure. They weren't alchemists, and soul power wasn't their forte. Facing such a terrifying soul pressure, although it couldn't be said to be overwhelming, the throbbing that came from the depths of their souls still made them feel grave. Old Luo and Luo Jin on the other side instantly looked at the spot where Xiaoyan was located when the spiritual storm swept over. When Luo Jin felt the terrifying pressure contained within the spiritual soul storm, even with his calm temperament, he could not help but feel a wave of shock. The pressure within the spiritual soul storm was actually so powerful. It was unexpected that Xiaoyan's spiritual strength had already grown to the advance of the D class within a couple of months after he had advanced to a rank 2 alchemist. If this speed continued, his spiritual strength would be comparable to those old demons from the Pill Tower in a couple of years. Luo Jin exchanged glances with old Luo by the side after feeling the shock in his heart. Old Luo frowned slightly because of this. He was not concerned about the strength of this spiritual storm. Instead, he clearly knew that Xiaoyan was refining that cluster of spiritual essence. However, since he was refining it, why would such a situation occur? As long as it did not possess a spirit that possessed its own consciousness, there would not be any danger when refining it. This was something that every practitioner knew. Moreover, old Luo had already thoroughly investigated that cluster of spiritual essence. It did not possess any other aura. However, the situation in front of them was clearly a rebellion that had occurred when one's spiritual strength was out of control. Since this was the case, what exactly was Xiaoyan doing? After pondering for a while, Elder Luo finally shook his head helplessly. Before he saw Xiaoyan, he wouldn't be able to understand the actual situation just by relying on the wild and violent spiritual strength. Elder Luo frowned and exchanged glances with Luo Jin, who was also frowning. "Sai, let's go and take a look. I really don't know what this little brat is up to." Luo Jin nodded when he heard Elder Luo's words. The two of them moved, and in a flash, they had already reached the top of the ginseng spiritual tree. They casually dispersed the spiritual storm that was coming towards them. In a flash, Elder Luo and Luo Jin had already arrived in front of Xiaoyan. When Elder Luo saw Xiaoyan, he immediately sensed the wild and violent spiritual strength in Xiaoyan's body. Elder Luo and Luo Jin's eyes narrowed slightly as an extremely strange expression appeared on their faces. Is this brat crazy? His spiritual strength has just reached the advanced martial emperor realm, and he dares to condense a spiritual pearl. I really don't know what to say about him. Elder Luo frowned and looked at Xiaoyan, whose aura was in a mess. A worried expression appeared on his face as he scolded softly. Luo Jin could only sigh helplessly when he heard this. He was also a little shocked by Xiaoyan's actions. He had actually used his spiritual strength at the advanced martial emperor realm to forcefully condense a spiritual pearl. Even if there was a chance of success, how high could it be? The failure at this moment not only confirmed Gu Yu's judgment, but also caused Xiaoyan's spiritual strength to be seriously injured. This result was a lesson that Xiaoyan had bought himself. One could only progress step by step on the path of cultivation. There was no shortcut. Even if there was, it would only result in gains and losses. In the end, one would not gain any benefits. If one wanted to become stronger, the fastest and most stable method was to be down to earth and take one step at a time. This was true for cultivation and life. After the spiritual strength within Xiaoyan's body had spread in all directions, Xiaoyan's face had become pale and bloodless. It was as though he had truly lost his soul. His body had become much thinner. This failure had caused Xiaoyan's spiritual strength to suffer unprecedented damage. Although Gu Yu had tried his best to stabilize the situation within his body during this period of time, Xiaoyan could not do anything other than struggle to move. The lack of spiritual strength within Xiaoyan's spiritual sea caused him to nearly faint. At this moment, he could only rely on his willpower to forcefully stand up. It was likely that Xiaoyan would have difficulty recovering for a long period of time in the future. He might even have to choose to give up on the trip to the lightning pool in the empty realm 2 months later. After standing up with great difficulty, Xiaoyan's eyes, which were about to close, swept around in a blur. His spiritual strength was so weak that Xiaoyan almost failed to detect the two people standing beside him. Xiao Yan's gaze passed through the gap between the two of them. He noticed that the spiritual storm that had yet to scatter above the endless sea of trees in the distance was like an invisible ruler's glow that repeatedly swept in all directions above the endless ginseng spirit tree's canopy. Chapter 242. On the hillside, Luo Jin supported Xiao Yan with both his hands as he slowly stood up. The expression in his eyes constantly changed. His lips moved slightly as if he wanted to say something. However, when he saw that Xiao Yan was already extremely weak, he ultimately remained silent. He glanced at old Luo beside him. The latter also sighed softly and helplessly shook his head, indicating that he was also at his wit's end. Xiao Yan's turbid old eyes were slowly lifted. They made contact with Luo Jin's eyes. The two of them felt a pity in their hearts. According to Xiao Yan's current condition, it was likely that they would miss the opportunity to enter the lightning pool in the empty realm 2 months later. Sigh, this brat. Usually he is rather meticulous in his work. I did not expect him to be so impulsive today. I hope that this incident will be of some help to you in the future. Old Luo softly sighed once again. He nodded his head at Luo Jin, and immediately turned around to walk towards the small wooden house. Behind him, Luo Jin also carefully supported Xiao Yan. His footsteps shifted slightly as he tried to catch up with the former. Oh. However, just as Luo Jin took half a step forward, his body, which was leaning slightly forward, suddenly stopped. It was as if he was forcefully pulled back by something from behind. In the next instant, Luo Jin's eyes revealed an astonished expression as he quickly turned his head around. His eyes instantly looked at Xiao Yan, who was standing motionlessly beside him. His eyes were filled with astonishment. However, Luo Jin's expression could not help but be slightly stunned. At a glance, Xiao Yan, who was still extremely weak a moment ago, was now staring intently at the sea of trees in the distance with his eyes wide open. More accurately speaking, he was staring intently at the huge wave that was like a majestic ruler's aura. At this moment, in Xiao Yan's eyes, other than the constantly sweeping dark green wave, everything in the world seemed to have disappeared from his eyes. Even the sound of the wind blowing past his ears had disappeared without a trace. Xiao Yan's body seemed to have solidified as it stood in the same spot. At this moment, Luo Jin sensed a steel-like hardness being emitted from Xiao Yan's body. Even the clothes on the surface of Xiao Yan's body did not move. This, as if he had thought of something, Luo Jin's pupils suddenly shrank. His eyes suddenly widened to the size of 2 copper bells, and he couldn't help but cry out in surprise. However, just as Luo Jin's words left his mouth, Elder Luo, who was behind him, pressed down on his shoulder and forcefully stopped him from saying anything. Luo Jin's body trembled as he turned to look. At the same time, Elder Luo shook his head slightly at Luo Jin and gestured for him to keep quiet. Only then did Luo Jin quickly nod his head. The two of them carefully retreated 100 zhang away from Xiao Yan. Only then did Elder Luo let out a sigh of relief. His cloudy old eyes met with Xiao Yan's, and both of them let out a sneer at the same time as they looked at Xiao Yan. Ah, this brat is really lucky. I originally thought that he would be delayed by this failure for a while. I didn't expect that he would benefit from this disaster, and actually enter the state. This state is something that can only be encountered and not sought. Thinking back, when I was young, I was lucky enough to enter the state once. The benefits that I obtained from it were indescribable. Luo Jin by the side also smiled and nodded when he heard this. Clearly, as a member of the younger generation, he was naturally clear about these deeds of old Luo. It was also because old Luo had once entered the will of mind state that he had used it to show off everywhere. When Luo Jin's gaze landed on Xiao Yan, his face did not have much of a change. However, there was still some envy that could not be described in words within his heart. Looking back at Xiao Yan, although his aura was still incomparably weak, at this moment his eyes were overflowing with radiance. The waves above the endless forest gradually spread out under Xiao Yan's gaze, engulfing the forest further away. Before the first wave had subsided, another wave rose. After the first wave of trees swept through the entire mountain forest, another wave of trees swept over. Xiao Yan's eyes stared intently at the scene in front of him. The weary qi in his body was gradually rising at this moment. 1,000 feet away, Elder Luo and Luo Jin could sense the changes in Xiao Yan's body. Their faces involuntarily revealed an astonished smile. The tree wave carried a cluster of leaves as it extended into the distance from the top of the sea of trees. The tangible leaves continued to churn within the invisible spiritual wave. Although it appeared chaotic, if one were to observe carefully, one would discover that the leaves maintained a special rhythm as they churned. This allowed the tree wave, which followed closely behind, to perfectly merge with it. This repeated for a short moment before 100,000 feet tree wave, which was like a city wall, appeared in the sky above the sea of trees. The tree wave churned and churned. During the process, it continuously absorbed the leaves that fell from the treetops, causing it to become even more imposing. As the tree wave engulfed the area, Xiaoyan repeatedly recalled every change and trajectory of the tree wave in his mind. The churning rhythm of the leaves, the different yet similar trajectories of the two tree waves, and every detail of the merging of the two tree waves continuously replayed in Xiaoyan's mind. At the same time, Xiaoyan's aura also rapidly rose. After 6 hours, Xiaoyan was still quietly standing at the same spot. Although he did not move, one could see at a glance that Xiaoyan's originally deathly pale face had once again regained its rosy luster. The aura on his body was even stronger than when he had just entered the ginseng spiritual world. The spiritual strength that had completely dissipated had also completely recovered to its peak within these short 6 hours. Even so, Xiaoyan still maintained the same posture as when he had just stood up. All of his attention was focused on his body. In his mind, he repeatedly recalled the scene of the tree wave engulfing the endless forest. At this moment, in Xiaoyan's mind, the spiritual strength of Xiaoyan was carefully observing every detail of the tree wave engulfing the area. With a wave of his hand, a heavy Xian ruler that was formed from spiritual strength appeared. The body of the enormous ruler was slightly slanted as it slowly swept past the spot where the tree wave passed. Xiaoyan also did his best to cooperate with the trajectory of the tree wave. His hand gently twisted, and the strength that was contained within his finger also changed accordingly. Only when the speed, inclination, and strength of the heavy ruler when it drew across the trajectory completely merged did Xiaoyan slowly withdraw the enormous ruler in his hand. At the same time, Xiaoyan, who was quietly standing in the outside world, suddenly raised his head. With a wave of his right hand, the huge black ruler suddenly flew out. He grabbed it in his palm and his left foot suddenly took half a step forward. After the huge ruler circled in his palm, a force emerged from his palm, and the huge ruler instantly froze in the air. The angle of its tilt was actually exactly the same as when he had imitated it previously. Ha! Without any hesitation, he let out a stern cry in his heart. The dou-qi within the vortex in Xiaoyan's body suddenly surged out wildly. His right hand held the huge ruler tightly as he exerted force with his right leg and transmitted it to his arm. His foot suddenly stomped on the ground and Xiaoyan's body rose into the air. The huge ruler in his hand was also swung out. As the ruler was swung out, a majestic ruler glow that was hundreds of thousands of feet tall suddenly shot out from the tip of the ruler, and shot explosively toward the opposite side of Xiaoyan. At this moment, the expressions of old Luo and his grandson on the other side instantly changed. This was because the ruler glow was actually flying toward them without any deviation. Chapter 243. Qi. The sharp ruler glow carried a majestic aura that could cut through the heavens as it shot out. Wherever it passed, the flat empty space would be instantly torn apart by the strong wind that it carried. The powerful aura caused even old Luo, who were facing it, to be extremely shocked. This kind of frightening might had already exceeded the category of an ordinary Do technique. Moreover, to be able to be used by a bandit with all his strength while carrying such a frightening might, this ruler of Xiaoyan's was likely comparable to a human-class Do technique. Old Luo's heart could not help but be extremely shocked when he thought of this. He had only entered the realm for a couple of hours, and had already created such a frightening Do technique. It was difficult to imagine just how frightening the scene would be if Xiaoyan had entered the realm for a little longer. At this moment, Luo Jin's eyes were staring intently at the majestic ruler glow that was flying toward him. A fiery hot fighting intent that soared to the sky was emitted from deep within his eyes. The dou-qi in his body was also swiftly rising at this moment. Honestly speaking, although Luo Jin had quite an understanding of Xiaoyan's strength, The two of them had never had the chance to fight due to their own matters. Hence, this rainbow-like ruler glow in front of him had aroused the fiery hot fighting intent that Luo Jin had been anticipating in his heart. With Luo Jin's eyesight, he was naturally able to tell that the strength contained in this ruler glow was definitely not inferior to a human-class Do technique. This also caused him to be extremely excited. Luo Jin flipped his hand, and a glow suddenly appeared in his palm. A sleek white-colored jade whisk fan appeared. Luo Jin waved his hand and the jade whisk fan emitted a schwa sound as it opened. Immediately, his gaze looked at the majestic ruler glow that was heading toward him. Luo Jin was just about to attack. However, just as the do chi in his body was about to move, the expression on Luo Jin's face involuntarily stiffened because of the scene in front of him. He clearly saw that there was actually a partially visible crimson blurry human figure within the ruler glow. The human figure held an enormous ruler and raised it high, preparing to unleash an even more frightening destructive force the instant it collided with Luo Jin. This is... When he saw this scene, Luo Jin's heart shook violently. The shock in his heart was self-evident. No matter what, he never imagined that this majestic ruler light was actually even more terrifying than what he had seen and imagined. Originally, he thought that this ruler glow was not inferior to a human Do technique in terms of strength. However, looking at the blurry human figure, it was clearly a manifestation of a Do technique that had transformed into a spirit. A Do technique transforming into a spirit. A true human-class Do technique. Just based on this point alone, the strength that this ruler glow would erupt with would definitely double. When he thought of this, Luo Jin couldn't help but recall the terrifying fire lotus that Xiao Yan had used back then. In addition to the fire lotus before him, it was hard to imagine that Xiao Yan, whose strength was only at the level of a 3-star half-martial emperor, had actually created 2 such powerful human-ranked Do skills. This kid will definitely be extraordinary in the future. Old Luo by the side finally discovered the uniqueness of the ruler glow. While his heart was greatly shaken, he could not help but praise Xiao Yan once again. Haha, good. A Do technique transforming into a spirit, huh? Since this is the case, I will also go all out. Although his heart was extremely shocked by Xiao Yan's ruler glow, Luo Jin ultimately still laughed out loud. The jade whisking fan in his hand was suddenly waved. The do chi in his body also swiftly surged out, and poured into the jade whisking fan in his hand. Following the pouring in of the do chi, numerous mysterious green-colored symbols gradually surfaced on the originally flat and unadorned fan, causing this jade whisking fan to emit an extremely mysterious feeling at this moment. Cool wind painting transforming into a form. Using the wind as a blade, cool wind slash. Luo Jin's tiger body shook as he slowly raised his right arm. Faint green-colored do chi drifted out as the jade fan was waved. In the next instant, a sharp glint suddenly shot out from Luo Jin's eyes when the majestic ruler glow attacked. A sharp cry that shook the sky was emitted from his mouth. His right arm was suddenly waved and his wrist tilted slightly. A sharp whistling sound of wind was emitted. The jade fan drew across the empty air, and a green-colored long rainbow that similarly spanned across the sky swept out and attacked the incoming ruler glow with a bang. Ha 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 ha, this clear wind chop of mine is also at the peak of the D-class Do techniques. It can be said to be one of my few trump cards. Today, let me see whether Brother Yin Zhao's ruler glow is stronger or my clear wind chop is better. Since Xiao Yan had already made his move, Luo Jin also knew that Xiao Yan had definitely recovered his consciousness. Next, it would be the true fight between him and Xiao Yan. Bang! These two Do skills were indeed worthy of being the peak of the human-ranked Do skills. They had just made contact when the frightening Do Chi that was contained within them immediately swept out. The collision of the two kinds of destructive forces caused the empty space within a 50-kilometer radius to suddenly shatter. If it was not forcefully stopped, it was likely that the entire ginseng spirit world would be affected. Luo Jin's expression changed slightly when he saw this. He had focused all his attention on the fight, and had forgotten that he was in the ginseng spirit world. Once those storms swept out, it was likely that the ginseng spirit world would suffer quite a great loss. Cuckoo, relax and go. Leave these matters to the old me. There is no need to alarm the other ginseng spirit tribe members about the small fights between you younger generation. At this moment, Luo Ao's faint laughter was transmitted over in a faint manner. At the same time, he waved his sleeve and an invisible pressure swiftly swept out. It forcefully stopped the Doqi storm when it swept out. At Luo Ao's level, he was already so powerful just by relying on his pressure. He was actually able to use his pressure to forcefully stop Doqi. This move caused Xiaoyan to be extremely shocked in his heart. He wondered if he would be able to solidify a place with a flick of his finger when he reached that level. With Luo Ao's attack, the storm was naturally unable to continue spreading. The empty space where Xiaoyan and Luo Jin were located had completely become their dual stage. In an instant, it attracted quite a number of Ginseng spirit tribe members who flew over to observe the fight. When the first ruler glow scattered, Luo Jin's clear wind chop had also been completely digested. The two of them could be considered to be evenly matched in this first exchange. Haha, it is indeed worthy of being a Do skill that has been comprehended after advancing. Such strength is indeed extraordinary. It is fortunate that I have already practiced this clear wind chop to the point of perfection. Otherwise, it would really be difficult for me to match it. At this moment, the difference between a self-created Do skill and an obtained Do skill was displayed. Although Xiaoyan was also relying on his state in order to unleash the strength of this ruler to the greatest extent, he was able to match Luo Jin's clear wind chop, which had been practiced to the point of perfection. This was indeed a clear advantage. If Xiaoyan were to further practice this ruler in the future, it was likely that Luo Jin's clear wind chop would no longer be a match for him. In the face of the strength displayed by this ruler, Xiaoyan could not help but feel a little surprised in his heart. However, as he knit his brows, Xiaoyan's eyes flickered slightly. This was because he could clearly sense that there were still continuous moves after that one ruler attack. However, because the ruler attack just now was merely an experiment, Xiaoyan did not use all of them. It was just that he did not know just how strong the continuous moves would be after that one ruler attack. Chapter 244. Haha, brother Yin Xiao, what are you thinking about? During a fight, you must not be distracted. Sensing the expression in Xiaoyan's eyes, Luo Jin laughed loudly, pulling Xiaoyan, who was considering whether to try a combo attack, back to reality. Xiaoyan also laughed heartily when he heard this. He knew that Luo Jin would definitely not hold back against him today. Since this was the case, he could let go of his courage and give it a try. It was also a good opportunity to see what great benefits Xiaoyan had gained from entering the state of mind this time around. Haha, good. Since this is the case, brother Luo Jin, just give it your all. I also want to see just how powerful this Do technique that I have just comprehended is. Faced with Luo Jin's reminder, Xiaoyan also laughed heartily. With a twist of his wrist, the enormous black ruler with an imposing aura spun agilely in Xiaoyan's palm like a long spear. Finally, Xiaoyan's palm exerted a little force, and the enormous ruler was easily inserted into a crack on the ground at an angle. From the looks of it, this was a demonstration of strength. However, Luo Jin became increasingly excited because of this. At the same time, he did not dare to be careless in his heart. From the looks of Xiaoyan's ruler just now, it was impossible for him to defeat Xiaoyan in terms of Do techniques if he did not take out a truly powerful technique. Since this was the case, haha, brother Yin Xiao, I'm coming. With a loud laugh, a graceful Do Chi light pillar immediately shot out from Luo Jin's eyes toward Xiaoyan. In response, Xiaoyan once again laughed heartily. He took half a step back and withdrew his right hand to his waist. His palm was flat and a flame-like Do Chi surged out and covered the surface of his palm. Yellow spring palm. Both of Xiaoyan's eyes stared intently at the Do Chi light pillar that was shooting toward him. The strength in his palm also became increasingly agglomerated. The moment the Do Chi light pillar attacked, his muscular body suddenly moved violently, and his palm violently met the light pillar. Bang! However, Xiaoyan's eyes involuntarily hardened the next moment. That Do Chi light pillar, which was filled with an imposing aura, was easily shattered by his yellow spring palm. This seemingly aggressive fighting aura beam was actually just a cover. Haha, brother Yin Xiao, over here. The instant Xiaoyan paused, Luo Jin's laughter sounded from the side of Xiaoyan's body. From the sound of his voice, it seemed like Luo Jin was quite satisfied with his move. Without any hesitation, Luo Jin threw a palm at Xiaoyan as he spat out the words from his mouth. Even though he was surprised, Xiaoyan was after all someone who had been on the battlefield for a long time. He was not the slightest bit afraid. His body suddenly shook and all the strength in his body gathered on his left shoulder that was close to Luo Jin's side. Do Qi violently surged. With a low shout in his heart, he used his left shoulder to meet Luo Jin's palm that was smashing towards him. Octane Blast. The Octane Blast was Xiaoyan's first Xian class Do technique. Although its tier was not high, its advantage was that it was extremely overbearing. After so many years of practice, Xiaoyan's control of the Octane Blast was extremely smooth. Now that Xiaoyan used it once again, as long as he was willing, he could casually use the Octane Blast from every part of his body. Moreover, with Xiaoyan's current strength, the strength of the Octane Blast when he used it again was definitely not inferior to a Tian class Do technique. Back then, Yao Lao had told Xiaoyan that the Octane Blast could be comparable to a D-class Do technique when practiced to its limit. However, now, Xiaoyan had used his own absolute strength to suppress this limit, allowing the Octane Blast to successfully enter a new level. Under Xiaoyan's repeated immersion, perhaps there would be a time when the Octane Blast in his hand could once again be upgraded and become a true D-class, or even Tian class Do technique. Bang! When the two came into contact, the clothes on Xiaoyan's body were as hard as steel. Luo Jin's face was also filled with shock as he looked at Xiaoyan in front of him. Since when could the shoulders be used to display Do techniques? The group of Spirit Ginseng tribe members who were watching the fight from outside were similarly shocked in their hearts. These Spirit Ginseng tribe members whose strength had reached the Band D class or higher were also extremely shocked by Xiaoyan's actions at this moment. They were all practitioners, but they did not know that one could actually use these parts of the body to display Do techniques. This is too unbelievable. The shoulders can actually release Do techniques. How is this possible? That's right. How is this possible? In history, I don't think I have ever heard of such a method of releasing Do techniques. Shocked and incredulous words spread around the periphery of this space. When these words entered Luo Jin's ears, the latter involuntarily let out a soft laugh. He laughed at the ignorance of the people who were speaking. Their weak strength and the seclusion of their tribe had caused them to know less and less about the control of their strength. If this continued, the Spirit Ginseng tribe would be annihilated before outsiders came to exterminate them. A Do technique is just a way for a practitioner to release their own strength. The reason why most practitioners inject their own Do Qi or Genesis Qi into their limbs and weapons is because they are already used to that kind of fighting style. But a Do technique is ultimately a Do technique. As long as one is willing, it doesn't matter where one can release the Do technique. What is important is the degree of mastery of the Do technique. After a sneer, Luo Jin's explanation instantly silenced the disbelieving Spirit Ginseng tribe members. In this place, besides Patriarch Qing Mu, Luo Jin was the most authoritative person. His words were indisputable. This was also Qing Mu's order. The two similarly strong Do techniques were in a stalemate for a couple of minutes before Xiaoyan's steel-like black-colored clothes actually split apart and formed a crack line that appeared like an explosion. In comparison, Luo Jin's Do technique was indeed a little stronger. It was no wonder that it was like this. When Luo Jin saw this, a smile involuntarily rose from the corners of his mouth. But when he looked at Xiaoyan, he found that Xiaoyan was also looking at him with a smile. With a blank expression, Luo Jin also felt that something was not quite right. However, when he focused his attention and looked over, Xiaoyan's mouth suddenly emitted a heaven-shaking explosive cry. His tiger body suddenly shook and a wild and ferocious huge force shook Luo Jin's body a few steps back. At the same time, Xiaoyan's mouth let out an explosive cry. Octane Blast. Explode. Luo Jin's expression instantly changed. Under Xiaoyan's ingenious control, Luo Jin hadn't discovered the 8 layers of hidden force of the Octane Blast in time. At this moment, the hidden force had already entered his body. If he tried to break it now, he would be in a mess again. While Luo Jin was busy breaking the 8 layers of hidden force in his body, Xiaoyan laughed loudly. He unceremoniously swung the black heavy Xian ruler by his side. At the same time that Luo Jin broke the hidden force in his body, he used the huge ruler's wide body to viciously slap Luo Jin. The faces of the spirit-participating tribe members outside the battleground also revealed a sour expression. They stared intently at the huge ruler in Xiaoyan's hand as he violently swung it. If Xiaoyan had used a Do technique on top of this ruler, the explosive force would naturally be enough to cause Luo Jin to be seriously injured. However, Xiaoyan only did this for the sake of satisfying himself. He only used brute force to send Luo Jin flying. With the latter's physical body, he naturally wouldn't suffer any fatal injuries. At the very most, he would only suffer some physical pain. Brother Luo Jin? Yes. Luo Jin had just broken the terrifying hidden force in his body, and had yet to recover when Xiaoyan's faint laughter was transmitted over. This also caused Luo Jin to reflexively raise his head, and let out a soft yes. However, at this moment, Xiaoyan carried an evil smile on his face. That terrifying huge black ruler also faced Luo Jin's delicate and handsome face. Luo Jin felt a chill on his back. At this moment he suddenly recovered. However, it was already too late. Ugh, it's over. The moment he saw the huge black ruler, Luo Jin helplessly said in his heart, knowing that he couldn't dodge. Chapter 245. Bang! A bang sounded. Under everyone's gazes, Luo Jin's body was like a soccer ball as it drew a parabola in the air. After which, it violently smashed into the peak of a mountain, and was deeply embedded within it. On the other hand, Xiaoyan's right leg abruptly took half a step back. The empty space under his feet instantly collapsed. With a twist of his wrist, the heavy Xian ruler was placed diagonally behind his back. At this moment, his bright eyes were slowly shut as he focused his mind. Xiaoyan did his best to think about the set of Do techniques that he had comprehended in the state of mind earlier. He wanted to take advantage of the fact that the state of mind had yet to completely disperse to use it once again with all his strength. This time around, he wanted to use all of the subsequent moves after the one ruler. At the same time, he wanted to see just what kind of strength this Do technique, which relied on the state of mind to comprehend, had when used with all his strength. This is a duel we agreed on. Why are you slapping my face? With an explosive cry, Luo Jin flew out from the pile of rock fragments. Other than appearing to be in a slightly miserable state, Luo Jin did not suffer any substantial injuries. Therefore, the moment he came out, he could not help but point at Xiaoyan's nose and angrily shout loudly. At this moment, Xiaoyan was completely immersed in his mind. Only his spiritual strength was spreading throughout the entire space. The aura on the heavy Xian ruler also gradually rose. The mysterious symbols on the body of the huge black ruler were also filled with a crimson-red flame-like Do Qi. A wild and violent destructive force was slowly agglomerating within the huge ruler. Seeing this scene, Luo Jin immediately let go of the joking thoughts in his heart. Xiaoyan's current appearance clearly indicated that he was going to use the Do technique from before. The first time he used it, Xiaoyan was only limited to a short span of a few breaths. Logically speaking, it was a little rushed. At this moment, Xiaoyan's entire body was immersed in it. If he were to use all of his strength again, the strength would likely be even more terrifying than before. In this way, Luo Jin did not have any extra time to imagine how strong the Do technique would be. A certain amount of time was needed to use a human-ranked Do technique. This was the case for Xiaoyan and Luo Jin. Since his clear wind chop was able to cancel out the previous strike, it should be able to do the same this time. Facing the Do technique that Xiaoyan was about to use, Luo Jin's heart was much calmer with his first experience. After all, only unfamiliar things would cause uncertainty to arise in one's heart. With a wave of his hand, the whisking jade fan appeared, and a familiar scene appeared once more. The group of spirit-participating clan members outside the arena also used various gazes to observe the two people in the arena. To the elite Do Di, Xiaoyan and Luo Jin in the arena could be considered dragons among men. Not only did they possess extraordinary strength, but the Do skills in their hands also caused these elite Do Di to covet them. Amidst the silence, Xiaoyan, who had been silent with his eyes closed, suddenly raised his head. The instant he opened his eyes, a bright light shot out, causing others to be unable to look directly at him. At the same time, Xiaoyan held the giant ruler in one hand and bent his right leg slightly as he stepped backward. He recalled the scene when the waves of trees swept over the sea of trees. With a thunder-like cry, Xiao Yan's body instantly shot out. At the same time, the giant ruler in his hand swept across the empty space in front of him. 100,000 feet majestic ruler glow instantly shot out from the tip of the ruler, forcefully tearing the surrounding empty space into pieces. It carried an unparalleled, terrifying force as it blasted toward Luo Jin. Feeling that the strength of the ruler glow was even more frightening than before, Luo Jin's heart involuntarily became solemn. As expected, under Xiao Yan's full strength, the strength of this Do technique had once again risen to another level. If he was unable to unleash the full strength of the clear wind chop, it was likely that Luo Jin would suffer quite a great loss when facing this ruler glow. Under his full strength, Luo Jin had also completely let go. He wildly poured the Do Qi in his body into the whisking jade fan in his hand. The green-colored Do Qi light illuminated the dark empty space. The surface of Luo Jin's body was also covered by a green light. Ha 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 ha, come brother Yin Xiao. Let me see just how terrifying this Do technique that you have comprehended with the help of the concept is under your full strength. As his voice sounded, Luo Jin's mouth suddenly emitted an explosive cry. He waved his hand and the closed whisking jade fan opened with a schwa sound. Green light shot out in all directions, painting with the clear wind, taking form. Using the wind as a blade, clear wind chop. As the stern cry sounded, the whisking jade fan, which was already completely covered by the green light, instantly cut through the empty space. It carried a wave of sharp rushing wind sound. 100,000 feet green light was instantly formed. It expanded explosively against the wind and violently smashed toward the majestic ruler glow that was heading toward him. When the two came into contact, the scene that had appeared earlier was once again played out. Luo Jin observed the two energies that were mutually consuming each other in the arena. His heart involuntarily felt a wave of joy. However, before Luo Jin could rejoice, Xiao Yan on the other side once again let out a shocking furious cry from his mouth. He once again waved the giant ruler in his hand. Qi. At this moment, not only Luo Jin, but many of the Bandi and Dodi experts outside of the arena, even old Luo, had eyes that were filled with shock as they watched the scene in the arena. Within a short few minutes, Xiao Yan had actually once again displayed that ruler technique Do technique. That's right. As Xiao Yan's giant ruler swept across the empty space, another majestic ruler glow that did not lose to the former shot out. It instantly caught up with the former and merged with the first ruler glow. Buzz buzz buzz. The fire-like bright red Do Qi dyed the empty space. The 100,000 feet long ruler glow suddenly brightened greatly. The aura on it also followed the trend and soared. Within a couple of breaths, it had suppressed the might of the clear wind chop. Seeing this scene, the expressions of everyone outside of the arena changed once again. It was one thing to consecutively display two human-class Do techniques, but why was this Do technique merged? Old Luo's eyesight was naturally not something that an ordinary person could compare with. The moment he saw the ruler glow, he had already made his own judgment in his heart. At this moment, when he saw that the ruler glow that came after had actually merged perfectly with the former, he immediately understood in his heart that Xiao Yan's set of Do technique was not just a simple ruler. Instead, it had subsequent consecutive moves. One ruler after another, wave after wave. The final superimposed result would likely be even more terrifying than he had imagined. This time around, Luo Jin was indeed a little too careless. This set of Do technique of Xiao Yan was really not easy to deal with. At this moment, the only thing that he could hope for in his heart was that this Do technique could only be used for one ruler. If that was the case, it was not impossible for Luo Jin to receive it. However, if not, it was likely that not only would he have to exhaust all of his tricks, he would also exhaust quite a lot of his own Do Qi. Bang! There was not much time left for Luo Jin. In merely a moment, the clear wind chop was finally forcefully shattered by the ruler glow that still had an incomparably powerful aura under its tenacious resistance. Seeing this, Luo Jin's heart was immediately slightly startled. He kept the jade fan into his storage ring with one hand, and the seals in his hand swiftly changed. The Do Qi in his body also crazily surged into his palm. When the ruler glow attacked, a bright green light also shone from Luo Jin's palm. The strength of this attack from Luo Jin was actually not the slightest bit weaker than the clear wind chop. Moreover, if one were to carefully observe it, it was likely that this attack was even stronger than the clear wind chop. This was one of the many trump cards that Luo Jin possessed. Whenever he used it, he had always been successful. He believed that if he were to use it today, it would definitely not disappoint him. Ha! A palm was thrown out and a crystal-like green palm fell from Luo Jin's hand and blasted explosively toward the majestic ruler glow. The crystal palm flew in the empty air. The originally quiet surroundings suddenly became a blowing hurricane. The crystal palm faced the hurricane and grew rapidly. By the time it arrived in front of the ruler glow, the crystal palm was already 100,000 feet in size. Bang! This time around, when the two collided, an intense collision sound suddenly reverberated throughout the area. An ear-piercing sonic boom repeatedly sounded like firecrackers. If it were not for old Luo's barrier, it was likely that the spirit participant tribe members outside of the arena would have been affected. This crystal palm was indeed worthy of being one of Luo Jin's trump cards. In an instant, it was actually able to fight the ruler glow to a draw. It was difficult to determine the victor. Ha! Another explosive cry sounded. Luo Jin was suppressed by this sound until the muscles at the corner of his eyes twitched intensely. It was really the case that whatever he was afraid of would happen. Earlier, he was still rejoicing in his heart that the chain attack was only 1 foot long. This time around he was shocked. This monster! At the same time that his heart was greatly shaken, Luo Jin's heart was also bitterly laughing as he cursed. However, he did not dare to be careless in his heart. A human class Do technique was not ordinary. Even he could not use it multiple times. Luo Jin only hoped that Xiaoyan would stop while he was ahead. After all, even if it was a chain attack, the exhaustion of Do Qi would be extremely frightening. There was no reason for Xiaoyan to exhaust so much Do Qi just for a momentary victory. Ha! Qi, Qi, Qi. After 5 feet, Xiaoyan finally stopped with a pale face. It was not that he wanted to stop. Xiaoyan wanted to know where the end of this ruler technique was. However, after the 7th foot, Xiaoyan was unable to swing it even if he wanted to. This was because at this time, the Do Qi in Xiaoyan's body had been completely exhausted. It was obviously impossible for him to swing the 8th foot. Moreover, Xiaoyan also faintly sensed that even if he had sufficient Do Qi, he would not be able to swing the 8th foot. After the 7th foot, Xiaoyan actually forgot how to swing the huge ruler in an instant. That strange feeling also abruptly disappeared from Xiaoyan's body. The concept had completely disappeared. Xiaoyan also felt a trace of something else at the end. After the 7th foot, there seemed to be a barrier. It was because of this that Xiaoyan was unable to continue comprehending the 8th foot. In other words, this ruler technique can at the very most be swung 7 feet? Xiaoyan quietly thought in his heart. Guyu did not reply. The result could only wait for Xiaoyan to confirm it himself. On the other side, Luo Jin's heart had already completely given up on any resistance as he faced the 5 ruler lights that had merged once again. 7 ruler lights had been merged. This set of Do techniques was already the peak existence among the human class Do techniques. If it was mastered, it would likely be comparable to a Ling class Do technique. In the face of such a frightening Do technique, Luo Jin would have difficulty resisting it even if he used all of his trump cards. Hence, rather than making a pointless resistance, it would be more appropriate to hand this mess over to the powerful old Luo to deal with. Elder Luo helplessly smiled after noticing Luo Jin's gaze. His heart was aware of the strength of the ruler technique. He did not joke around. His body flashed and appeared in front of Luo Jin. An admiration flashed across Elder Luo's eyes as he faced the frightening ruler light that had shattered the crystal hand. The strength of this ruler technique was likely far from being as simple as a human class Do technique. If Xiaoyan were to properly practice it, it would definitely become a great trump card of Xiaoyan's in the future. Elder Luo raised his hand. His palm aimed at the majestic ruler light. A domineering aura that belonged to an expert quietly spread, causing the spirit participating tribe members to involuntarily reveal respectful eyes. Elder Luo only calmly raised his eyes when the ruler light approached him. Elder Luo displayed an indifferent attitude in the face of this frightening Do technique that could defeat any elite bandit below the 9-star level. Do Qi. This was something that he had practiced in his early years. If one were to talk about it, there was indeed a great distance between him and the current him. Stop. An extremely calm stop word appeared to have dominated this entire place. At this moment, it appeared as though time had stilled. Even the do-chi that was circulating within the bodies of everyone present had stopped. The ruler light was naturally no exception. Elder Luo gently waved his hand. The do-chi ruler light, which had already become unusually wild and violent, instantly hit its wild and violent aura. It turned into numerous bright red flowing lights that agglomerated into a cluster. Elder Luo gently waved his hand, and the pure do-chi light cluster appeared to have found its owner. It rushed into the vortex within Xiaoyan's body in a flash. Xiaoyan's expression also swiftly turned around at this moment. This seemingly simple scene caused everyone present to feel shocked. Xiaoyan was also so shocked by this move of Elder Luo that he was unable to recover for a long while. Luo Jin looked at the ruler light that had disappeared. The anxiety in his heart also disappeared. Cuckoo, you little fellow, your luck is really good. You have profited from a disaster, and have actually comprehended such an extraordinary do technique. Use it well. In the future, it will definitely become a great trump card for you. Elder Luo carelessly restored the dark empty space to its original state. His body moved and arrived in front of Xiaoyan as he smiled and spoke to Xiaoyan. Xiaoyan nodded. He was certain that this ruler technique that he had comprehended today would likely add firewood to Xiaoyan's overall strength in the future. Haha, that's right. This do technique of Brother Yan Xiao is likely an invincible existence among the entire man-class do techniques. If it were not for the fact that my weapon was not a huge ruler, I would definitely be curious about this level of do technique. Luo Jin also walked forward. His tone similarly carried praise. He was the first to experience the strength of this ruler technique do technique. No one could replace his judgment. Cuckoo, little fellow Yan Xiao. The old me can see that this ruler technique of yours has already been completed. Its strength is also quite extraordinary. Since this is the case and it is also a man-class do technique, you should give it a name. Xiaoyan nodded. He understood in his heart that this do technique was created by him when he had advanced to the do realm. He had once used a ruler to shatter the empty space and break the horizon. Its strength could be said to be breaking the sky. It was also divided into 7 feet. Xiaoyan immediately had a name in his heart. Cuckoo, I have thought it through. Since this ruler technique is divided into 7 feet, then I will call it the 7-layered sky-breaking ruler. Chapter 246. Unknowingly, Xiaoyan had already been in the ginseng spiritual world for 10 days. In the outside world, Xiaoyan, the champion of this year's alchemist conference and the rank 2 alchemist who had refined an emperor-grade complete pill, had completely disappeared for 10 days after the alchemist conference. Many forces in the ancient wilderness city were incomparably shocked by this. A living person, a dignified half-emperor expert, had actually quietly disappeared after the alchemist conference. This was enough to attract the attention of these people. During these 10 days, those various clans and factions who had originally come to visit Xiaoyan were finally unable to endure any longer. They either took the initiative to give up or felt that Xiaoyan was purposely being arrogant. Hence, they left one after another. The Alchemist Guild also didn't give any explanation. This was because they didn't know where Xiaoyan had gone after leaving. Furthermore, no one in the ancient wilderness had seen Xiaoyan leave the city. Those who knew that Xiaoyan had the Lightning Void Pool invitation in his hands also had some guesses in their hearts. The Lightning Void Pool wasn't an ordinary cultivation material. It was a creation of heaven and earth that could rapidly increase the strength of a half-emperor expert. Given Xiaoyan's character, it was absolutely impossible for him to give up on it. Even if he left the city, Xiaoyan would definitely return within 2 months. Of course, there were also many people who cast doubtful gazes at the Yunin Pavilion. They still remembered that during the Alchemist Conference, Elder Xian had represented the Yunin Pavilion to speak up for Xiaoyan. Given Xiaoyan's cultivation talent, perhaps he really would be valued by the Yunin Pavilion. Perhaps Xiaoyan was currently in the Yunin Pavilion. Unfortunately, even though everyone had their own thoughts, what kind of power was the Yunin Pavilion? Not only in the ancient wilderness city, but even in the entire southern region, there were many people who were afraid of it. If they wanted to find someone, they absolutely couldn't go to the Yunin Pavilion. Even if Xiaoyan was indeed inside, they absolutely couldn't go there. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the Yunin Pavilion's deterrence was in the southern region. At this moment, there were a couple of human figures wearing embroidered robes seated around a table in a certain remote and quiet house within the savage ancient city that was covered in dust. These few people were none other than MOD and the others who had fled in a panic during the alchemist's grand meeting. However, at this moment, other than MOD, Yanbing, and Old Weirdo Who, there was another completely unfamiliar person present. Humph! That little bastard is actually so cowardly. In order to hide from us, he actually went missing again. MOD's eyes were dark. A fury immediately rose in his heart when he thought of Xiaoyan. The reputation that he had accumulated over many years had been snatched away by a member of the younger generation. The things that Xiaoyan had obtained should belong to him. Hiding from us? By him. Ed. Yanbing's eyes narrowed. Her ice-cold gaze caused the few people in the room to feel a chill rise from their backs. Old Freak, whose eyes flickered slightly. He took a glance at the three people sitting before him. However, he was well-behaved and did not say anything. Although that guy who came later was not as strong as him, he was still a peak late-stage half-martial emperor expert. At this moment, MOD appeared to be following Yanbing's lead. Old Freak, who was the weakest person in this group. Thus he naturally had to be extremely careful. Hearing Yanbing's words, MOD frowned. In his heart, he thought that Yanbing was trying to boost the morale of others and diminish her own prestige. With Yanbing's peak late-stage 8-star half-martial emperor strength, how could she be afraid of a lifeless puppet? As for Elder Xian, she could just hand him over to Old Monster Who. There was no need to fight to the death. As long as she could delay him and give Yanbing enough time, it would be enough. Elder Yanbing, this, humph. Do you think that Gu Li and Qi Lin are just decorations? The two of them have been brothers for many years. Their cooperation is very good. If the two of them were to join hands, even I would have to expend a lot of effort. How could you possibly kill Yan Xiao with just these people? Those words were like a basin of cold water that was directly poured over MOD's head. The anger that had just risen in his heart was instantly extinguished. Seeing this, that 7-star half-martial emperor knew that Yanbing was extremely dissatisfied with this MOD. If it wasn't for him, Yanbing wouldn't have gotten into a relationship with Xiao Yan, and wouldn't have gotten into trouble with that Zhou Tai. Seeing that Yanbing was angry, he hurriedly opened his mouth and said, "In that case, where exactly did this Yan Xiao go? To be able to disappear from the ancient savage city without a trace is something that is impossible. There are many half-martial emperors in the city. Even the slightest fluctuation of Douqi would be discovered by them. Furthermore, that Yan Xiao is an alchemist. The Douqi within his body is even more explosive. Once he makes any movement, he will definitely be discovered." Only after hearing those words did Yanbing suppress the anger in her heart. Her eyes narrowed and she fiercely poured a mouthful of tea into her cup. Immediately after, she clenched her hand and the jade teacup instantly turned into powder. The powder drifted down from between her fingers. No matter where he is right now, we only need to wait for him in the lightning pool. I don't believe that the group from the Yunin Pavilion will still send people in to protect him. Haha, that's true. As long as we wait until Brother Zhang Hao successfully breaks through to the 8-star half-martial emperor realm, we will immediately go and find them. At that time, it will be the time of Yan Xiao and Gu Li's death. Old Freak, who added with a smile that was not a smile. However, this caused an extremely cold glint to instantly flash through Yanbing's eyes. She glanced at the 7-star half-martial emperor called Zhang Hao. Then she looked at Old Freak Who and said with an extremely overbearing tone, "No. Wait until I break through to the 9-star half-martial emperor realm. I will personally kill the three of them." This cold shout caused MOD and Old Freak Who's hearts to immediately freeze. The two of them faintly exchanged glances. Immediately after, they looked at Yanbing and fiercely nodded their heads. The instant Old Freak Who nodded his head, a trace of cold sweat slowly dripped down from the hair on both sides of his face. On a mountain peak in the ginseng spiritual world, Xiao Yan, who who was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, slowly withdrew from his training state. The surging do-chi in his body was gradually suppressed. The whistling sound of wind around him also returned to calmness. At this moment, the sky had already turned dark. The sky gradually darkened. At the far end of one's line of sight, there were strands of golden-colored light that were reluctant to part. At this moment, the azure blue sky was suffused with red light. The burning clouds were like raging flames as they hung in the sky. Xiao Yan's gaze was calm as he watched the golden-colored light. His gaze gradually turned into a focused one. The golden-colored light that was reflected from deep within his eyes transformed into a green-clothed absolute beauty that could cause the downfall of a country. It was Xiao Yan's wife Sun Er. Xiao Yan gently raised his hand. Do-chi emerged from his palm and gradually condensed in front of Xiao Yan. Sun Er and Kai Lin's equally gorgeous and exceptional appearance appeared in front of Xiao Yan. Sun Er, Kai Lin, I have unknowingly left the Do-chi continent for a year. Have the both of you been well during these days that I was not around? Xiao Yan gently lifted his hand and gently rubbed the faces of the two illusionary beauties in front of him. It was as though they were right in front of him. Although being away from home for a year was not considered long for experts like them, the isolation of the continent had caused them to miss each other even more. Do-chi Continent, Central Plains, within the territory of the 9 serene deep-ground python tribe. At this moment, a couple of human figures were standing in front of a vast lake. The one leading them was an extremely beautiful woman with an extremely cold demeanor. Beside her was a beauty that did not lose to the former. She was a beauty that could cause the downfall of a country. Beside these two women, there was a tall and burly man standing upright. Thank you, Tribal Chief Yao Ming, for lending this 9 serene spring to me. The first to open her mouth was the leading beauty. The other woman beside her smiled and nodded in agreement after her words sounded. She threw a grateful look at Yao Ming. Haha, what is there to thank me for? It is merely a small matter. The yellow spring blood crystals in the 9 serene spring have all been collected. It is likely that my tribe will not need it for a long time. Since this is the case, I might as well do you a favor and lend it to Sister Kai Lin. Ha ha ha. This exceptional woman, and the one beside her were surprisingly Kai Lin and Sun Er. Sun Er's eyes contained a worried expression as she looked at Kai Lin, after the matter of the 9 serene spring was resolved. She frowned and said, Kai Lin, are you really planning to enter? I am worried. Kai Lin smiled warmly when she heard Sun Er's concerned words. She nodded and slowly extended her jade-like hand. She held Sun Er's soft and delicate hand. What is there to be worried about? I am merely going in to take a look. It will not be too late to tell me if anything happens. Moreover, with my current strength, I can go anywhere on the Do-chi continent. It is merely a lake. I can just go in. There is nothing to be worried about. Kai Lin quickly opened her mouth after speaking. She seemed to have convinced Sun Er. Before Sun Er could open her mouth, Kai Lin laughed. Moreover, aren't you afraid that that fellow will forget about us after going to a new world? What will happen to us if he is unfaithful and finds another wife? If it is really possible, I will go over and keep an eye on him. Let's see if he dares to fool around. Kai Lin and Sun Er involuntarily laughed after these words were spoken, causing Yao Ming by the side to curl his mouth. The two women chatted and laughed as they gave some instructions. Although Sun Er was unwilling, Kai Lin insisted on doing so. Sun Er could not stop her even if she wanted to. Instead of feeling helpless and worried, it was better to pray for Kai Lin and hope that nothing would happen to her in the 9 serene spring. At the same time, Sun Er began to miss Xiao Yan amidst the laughter from earlier. She had nearly forgotten that Xiao Yan had left the Do-chi continent for over a year with the flow of time. Her heart missed him even more when she thought of him now. She wished that she could immediately enter the mysterious tunnel from back then, and head to where Xiao Yan was to search for Xiao Yan. Kai Lin's lovely body shook while Sun Er was absent-minded. Her gentle and pretty body instantly appeared on the surface of the lake. She glanced at Sun Er and Yao Ming on the shore. A grave expression was revealed on Kai Lin's pretty face. She did not know just what was at the bottom of the 9 serene spring. The reason why she wanted to go down was because she wanted to understand why the enormous 7-colored heaven-swallowing python tribe from back then ended up in such a state. Chapter 247. As time swiftly flowed by, Xiaoyan had unknowingly disappeared from the savage ancient city for half a month. Although Xiaoyan's concealment had stirred quite a great storm within the wasteland, this storm merely lasted for less than half a month before it was gradually suppressed by the increasing number of Bandi experts within the ancient wasteland city. There would be new stories happening in the ancient city every day. Even though Xiaoyan was a genius and his alchemy skills were unprecedented in the ancient city, the stories of the ancient city would not stop for Xiaoyan alone. When some of the experts in the ancient city noticed the group of half-emperors swarming over, they could not help but be curious about who they were. However, they quickly reacted. Apart from the void lightning pool that only appeared once every 100 years, there was probably no other reason that could make so many half-step emperors swarm over here in the ancient savage city. At this moment, some of the old people in the city who knew about this matter suddenly realized that there was only 1.5 months left until the opening of the lightning pool. It was no wonder that these half-step emperors, who usually cultivated in seclusion, would all come to the wildlands. If nothing major happened, they wouldn't be in the mood to come here. It was already difficult for half-emperors, especially high-level half-emperors, to increase their strength at their current level. It was somewhat unrealistic to rely on heavenly treasures that could increase a half-emperor's strength. After all, this was the border of the continent, a barren land. How could there be any exceptional cultivation resources? Even if there were, they would have been taken by the powerful magical beasts long ago. How could it be so easy to snatch them from their hands? Rather than looking for trouble, it was better to cultivate peacefully. In comparison, this was the right way to go. But now the void lightning pool was an anomaly among the numerous cultivation resources. In a short few days, almost 100 half-emperors had appeared in the ancient city. Such a huge lineup could be considered extremely powerful even in the entire southern region. Almost 100 half-emperors had gathered in the ancient city. For a time, the entire ancient city became extraordinarily lively. Everyone had naturally forgotten about the genius Xiaoyan. However, as more and more half-emperors appeared in the bustling ancient city, trouble arose in the ancient city. The strength of a half-step emperor was naturally undeniable. If two half-step emperors were to fight each other, it would be very difficult to determine the outcome of the battle. Thus, generally speaking, even if there were conflicts between half-step emperors, they would try their best to avoid fighting each other. However, even though they were all half-emperors and were usually apprehensive of each other, the situation was different now. The opening of the void lightning pool was getting closer and closer. However, there were only a total of 30 lightning pool invitations. As the saying goes, there are too many monks and too little gruel. Currently, there were nearly 100 half-martial emperors in the ancient savage city. However, less than a third of them would be able to enter the lightning pool in the end. This result would cause most of the half-emperors to have wasted their trip. However, half-emperors were half-emperors. Which one of them did not have any pride in their hearts after reaching this level of cultivation? They had painstakingly made this trip for the sake of obtaining a lightning pool invitation. However, in the end they had come for nothing. This was something that they could not accept. Thus, even if they were unable to enter the void lightning pool, these half-emperors would definitely not be willing to be spectators. As a result, the continuous battle in the savage ancient city officially unfolded in the void. This was not only for the sake of obtaining the qualifications to enter the void lightning pool. It was also to display the results of their cultivation. It could be considered as a form of showing off, a different kind of competition. President Gu Li and Qi Lin stood in the inner courtyard of the Alchemists Guild. The two of them raised their heads and looked at the battle in the sky where Do Qi surged. They could not help but sigh softly. Ugh! Where exactly did that brat Yin Xiao go? The void lightning pool is about to open, but he just had to go missing at this time. Gu Li could not help but shake his head when he thought of Xiaoyan. He was also very curious about Xiaoyan's whereabouts. After Xiaoyan left the Alchemist Association that day, he appeared to have completely disappeared from the face of the earth. Not even a trace of his aura was left behind. This appeared incomparably strange. Qi Lin also frowned slightly when he heard this. He was extremely worried for Xiaoyan. He hesitated for a moment before opening his mouth to speak. Gu Li, do you think that Yin Xiao would have been by MOD? Before he finished speaking, Guli waved his hand gently and shook his head once again. He said, "Impossible." Back then, Zhoutai was still in the ancient city and they had fled miserably. They clearly knew how powerful Zhoutai was, and would definitely not rashly attack Yan Xiao. Yan Bing was very clear about this point. Once he was discovered, even he would not be able to bear the consequences. Now all we can do is to wait and see. Perhaps, while we are worried about Yan Xiao, he might be sitting on the mountain and watching the tiger from afar. Guli's old eyes narrowed as he pondered in his heart. He once again looked at the increasingly fiery battle circle in the sky, and quietly said in his heart, "After all, wasn't he also like this the last time?" Ginseng spirit whirled on the mountain peak. Xiao Yan, who was cultivating with his eyes closed, raised his eyebrows slightly. His eyelids trembled slightly as he exited his cultivation state. He turned his head and saw old Luo's figure slowly walking over from a short distance behind him. Luo Jin, who was following beside him, had already left the ginseng spirit world. Xiao Yan swiftly stood up and respectfully bowed when he saw the person who had arrived. Although he was already familiar with old Luo, an elder was still an elder and a senior was still a senior. In terms of etiquette, Xiao Yan would rarely be inferior to others. Of course, that was built on the basis of mutual respect between both parties. If others did not offend him, he would not offend them. "If you respect me, I will return you 10 times over." This was Xiao Yan's principle all along. Old Luo smiled and nodded as a return of the greeting. Compared to Xiao Yan, old Luo was extremely casual. Etiquette was just a superficial act to him. However, he was quite satisfied with Xiao Yan's attitude. "Haha, if there is nothing else, this old man will not bother to disturb your cultivation. However, I'm afraid that you will have to leave now." Old Luo walked in front of Xiao Yan and said with a smile. Hearing old Luo's words, Xiao Yan was immediately stunned. Did these words mean that he wanted to chase him away? However, old Luo was not that kind of person. Could it be that he was from the ginseng spirit race? Xiao Yan frowned and did not know what to think. He even suspected that the person was from the ginseng spirit tribe. "Haha, don't think too much. The ginseng spirit tribe is not an ungrateful tribe. The reason why I want you to leave is that someone has come looking for you. If I'm not mistaken, that person should be looking for you." Upon hearing this, Xiao Yan raised his eyebrows and could not help but be slightly surprised. Looking for him? Outside of the ginseng spirit tribe, Xiao Yan had never mentioned to anyone that he had come to the ginseng spirit world. How could anyone know that he was here? However, judging from the smile on old Luo's face, the person who was looking for him should not be looking for trouble. In that case, he might as well ask him how he knew that he was here. Chapter 248. Hum. As a circular invisible energy ripple spread apart, a delicate and handsome young man wearing a black robe slowly walked out from a small courtyard in the southern part of the city, which appeared to be extremely dilapidated. At this moment, a figure was pacing back and forth in front of the entrance of the courtyard. He was hesitating whether he should enter or not. Everyone in the wildlands knew that this small courtyard was the residence of the expert called Elder Luo. Today, he had come here to confirm the guess in his heart. Yan Xiao had been missing for half a month. During this half a month, the power structure in the wildlands' ancient city had been constantly changing. Half-martial emperors had gathered in the wildlands, causing the strength of the half-martial emperors in the wildlands' ancient city to continuously increase. Normally, a 3-star half-martial emperor would be able to control a force. However, at this moment, they were insignificant among the half-martial emperors. At this moment, an unknown person had spread the news that besides Yan Xiao, who had already disappeared, there was actually a 3-star half-martial emperor in the wildlands' ancient city, who possessed the Void Lightning Pool invitation. When this news spread, the half-martial emperors in the wildlands' ancient city instantly went crazy. Their bloody eyes, which were filled with greed, scanned every 3-star half-martial emperor. It was as if they wanted to see through their bones. Coincidentally, just as everyone was searching for that 3-star half-martial emperor, the news that came from an unknown place had once again spread wildly. This time, everyone's gazes were focused on Qin Zhong, who was familiar with Xiao Yan. That's right. At this moment, the person standing in front of the small courtyard was Qin Zhong. Currently, The Void Lightning Pool invitation was like a hot potato. Whoever obtained it would become the target of everyone. Other than those high-level half-martial emperors, the only person in the Wildlands ancient city that everyone knew was Qin Zhong, who possessed the Void Lightning Pool invitation. Therefore, in the past few days, the entire Wildlands ancient city had been in an uproar because of Qin Zhong. All those below 7-star half-martial emperors were frantically searching for Qin Zhong. If Qin Zhong did not know his own limits and knew that it was difficult for him to protect the Void Lightning Pool invitation with his current strength, he would have hidden himself long ago before the news spread. Otherwise, he would not have the chance to appear here. Standing outside the entryway, Qin Zhong was full of hesitation. There was both hope and worry in his heart. In fact, Qin Zhong did not know that Xiao Yan was at Elder Luo's place. This time, he was only trying his luck. He hoped to find Xiao Yan, but he did not want Xiao Yan to be his protector. Before this, Qin Zhong had secretly gone to the Alchemist Guild. He was now the target of public criticism. Everyone wanted to get the Void Lightning Pool invitation from him. Naturally, they had to be careful. Even the elders of the Alchemist Guild had to be on guard. After seeing Gu Li and Qi Lin, the two of them naturally knew about the relationship between Qin Zhong and Xiao Yan. Therefore, the two of them gave an honest answer regarding Xiao Yan's whereabouts. Although the answer was not satisfactory, Qin Zhong knew that they would not lie to him. After leaving the Alchemist Guild, the first place that Qin Zhong thought of was naturally what most people thought. Xiao Yan must be at the Yunin Pavilion. After all, everyone in the ancient wilderness city saw that Elder Xian stood up for Xiao Yan on behalf of the Yunin Pavilion that day. However, on second thought, Qin Zhong frowned. The Yunin Pavilion was bustling with business all day long, and there was no lack of half-emperor experts. If he went in, wouldn't he be walking into a trap? Although the Yunin Pavilion had strict rules and absolutely prohibited fighting in it, even if his whereabouts were exposed, it would be a devastating blow to Qin Zhong. He was not at the Alchemist Guild, nor could he enter the Yunin Pavilion, nor could he leave the ancient wilderness city. Other than that, the only place that Xiao Yan could go was this quiet, dilapidated courtyard. Currently, this was the only place in the city that had any contact with Xiao Yan that ordinary people would not think of or dare to look for. Outside the entrance, Qin Zhong looked at the small courtyard in front of him nervously. Compared to looking for Xiao Yan, Elder Luo, who was in the courtyard, made him more nervous. Under such circumstances, the more hesitant a person was, the more nervous they would be. Ever since Qin Zhong had arrived, he had been standing in front of the entrance for nearly 2 hours. Needless to say, he was very nervous. At the moment, even his normal breathing had become rapid, and there was a trace of cold sweat on his forehead. In the courtyard, Xiao Yan came out of the ginseng spiritual world. His enormous soul power allowed him to immediately detect the person standing outside the entrance. I didn't expect it to be him. It seems like he came here with the intention of giving it a try. Is it because of Elder Luo that he hasn't come in yet? Xiao Yan muttered under his breath and shook his head with a smile. Elder Luo's deterrence in the ancient wilderness city was really terrifying. With Qin Zhong's strength as a 3-star half-martial emperor, he could be considered an expert in the ancient wilderness city. Now that he had revealed such an appearance, it really made people sigh. Xiao Yan lifted his feet and walked towards the outer courtyard. The wooden door between the outer courtyard and the inner courtyard was closed. Therefore, Qin Zhong could not see Xiao Yan. Moreover, this small courtyard was enveloped by Elder Luo's aura. It was even more impossible to investigate. Haha, what a coincidence. Isn't this the Qin clan's ancestor? Why, you have nowhere to hide from those half-martial emperors, so you came here to seek protection from Elder Luo? Oh right, that Yin Xiao is somewhat related to Elder Luo. However, Elder Luo is helping Yin Xiao, not you. Just as Xiao Yan arrived in front of the wooden door, and was about to open it and leave, Qin Zhong, who was outside the entrance, looked behind him with a surprised expression. There, an old man with a gloomy face was slowly walking over. Looking at the old man's aura, it was actually several times stronger than Qin Zhong's. He was obviously a 6-star half-martial emperor expert. When Xiao Yan heard that voice, he couldn't help but frown slightly. The hand that he was about to raise slowly lowered once again. Immediately after, The corners of his mouth curled up into a sneer. His soul power spread out and observed the situation outside the entrance. If I'm not wrong, the news that the void lightning pool is attached to my body was spread by you. Li Gan. Qin Zhong narrowed his eyes and ignored Li Gan's words. He stared at the figure that was slowly walking away and berated angrily. The person who had arrived was the ancestor of the Li clan from the ancient city of Wildlands, Li Gan. Kuku brother Qin Zhong, you can't put it this way. The void lightning pool invitation is something that can be obtained by those who are capable. It is ultimately useless for someone like you to hide. When the time is right, the lightning invitation in your hands will inevitably be snatched away. My actions are merely to let you know your own limits. Li Gan did not deny Qin Zhong's furious rebuke. His footsteps did not pause as he spoke, and walked directly toward Qin Zhong. You have already expected that I would come here. Qin Zhong's face carried a cautious expression as he spoke angrily. The dou qi within his body had already spread throughout his entire body. He was prepared to deal with Li Gan at any moment. Kuku, after all, the only person you can rely on in this ancient city of Wildlands is Yan Xiao. You are willing to risk your life for him. He will naturally remember this favor in his heart. Now that he is nowhere to be found, it is only natural that you would come here. However, it seems that you have come a little earlier than I had expected. The corner of Li Gan's mouth was lifted into a dark and evil smile. Both of his eyes overflowed with a cold glint. Xiao Yan and Mod's group were locked in an intense battle. Since this was the case, he would allow them to fight. It would be best if both parties were injured. He, on the other hand, was only concerned about the void lightning pool. What a good scheme. Even if this is the case, Brother Yan Xiao will definitely find out if you dare to kill me in front of old Luo's eyes. Qin Zhong's face twitched continuously. Li Gan in front of him was really a vicious person. Li Gan merely smiled when he heard this. He lifted his eyes and said, "Who said that I want to kill you? I know that the outcome would be very troublesome. Therefore, I only want the void lightning pool invitation in your hands. That is enough." Qin Zhong's heart relaxed slightly. At the very least, Li Gan in front of him would not harm his life. However, he could not let his guard down. Even if you snatch the void lightning pool invitation from my hands, I'm afraid that you will not be able to protect it. Brother Qin Zhong, you don't have to worry about this. Qin Zhong wanted to stall for time, hoping that he would be able to think of a way to escape. The difference between a 3-star half-martial emperor and a 6-star half-martial emperor was too great. He absolutely could not face them head-on. However, Li Gan clearly did not want Qin Zhong to escape. Before his voice had even faded, Li Gan, who was only a few feet away from Qin Zhong, instantly moved and grabbed at Qin Zhong. Chapter 249. In the blink of an eye, Li Gan had arrived before Qin Zhong. A violent gale ruthlessly blew onto Qin Zhong's body, causing him to nearly suffocate. The oppressive might of a 6-star half-martial emperor completely poured onto Qin Zhong's body, causing him to be unable to move. Qin Zhong was unable to dodge this attack. As for Li Gan, he carried an incomparably frightening and vast aura as he ruthlessly grabbed at Qin Zhong's head. Although it was impossible for Li Gan to truly kill Qin Zhong, he was still confident in his ability to injure Qin Zhong. Even if Yan Xiao really came to find him, he would not be able to do anything to Qin Zhong. Qin Zhong knew that he was no match for the incoming attack. However, Li Gan had already arrived in front of him. The surging dou qi caused Qin Zhong to feel as if there was a thorn in his back. At this moment, it was already too late to retreat. In the end, Qin Zhong was not a coward. He who had a fiery temper was afraid of Li Gan because of the difference in strength. However, since the arrow was already on the bow, he had no choice but to release it. Instead of waiting for death, it was better to go all out and fight. Perhaps there might be a slight chance of turning things around. Unfortunately, no matter how hard Qin Zhong tried, his strength was only that of a 3-star half-martial emperor. Compared to Li Gan, there was a difference of 3 stars. To Qin Zhong, such a difference in strength could be said to be the gap between heaven and earth. Sure enough, in merely a single exchange, Qin Zhong was only able to endure for a few breaths of time before being defeated by Li Gan's mocking gaze. In this battle, Qin Zhong did not even have the opportunity to counterattack. It was hard to imagine that when Xiaoyan fought with Li Gan, he was actually able to force the latter to admit defeat. How frightening was Xiaoyan's strength. TSK. You cannot be distracted when fighting. Just as Qin Zhong was feeling astonished by Xiaoyan's strength, Li Gan's cold laughter quietly sounded beside his ear. Bang! Without waiting for Qin Zhong to react, Li Gan's leg, which was filled with explosive and frightening power, had already ruthlessly smashed into Qin Zhong's abdomen. Qin Zhong's body flew out uncontrollably and smashed into the door of the small courtyard. His chest puffed out and blood spurted out from his mouth, dyeing a large area of the void red. TSK. You're merely a 3-star half-martial emperor. Yet you're actually distracted while fighting against me. You're really looking down on me. Li Gan sneered and slowly walked towards Qin Zhong. Although the blow just now was not enough to seriously injure Qin Zhong, it was enough to make it difficult for him to resist. Bah! Haha, Li Gan. Do you know why I was distracted just now? In the face of Li Gan's sneer, Qin Zhong revealed a mocking expression and laughed instead. Li Gan frowned slightly. His eyes narrowed as he stared at Qin Zhong. A glint gathered in his eyes. He was already a little angry. Turbulent dough cheese slowly gathered in his palm under his sleeves. Ha. The reason why I was distracted just now was because I recalled the big battle between you and Yan Xiao. A 6-star half-martial emperor actually admitted defeat in front of a 3-star half-martial emperor. Ha. Li Gan was already unable to restrain his anger when these words left his mouth. His expression suddenly became gloomy. His body instantly moved and arrived in front of Qin Zhong, who had yet to stand up. He grabbed at Qin Zhong's neck. Bang! However, just as Qin Zhong was prepared to be brutally beaten up by Li Gan, who was in front of Qin Zhong, was suddenly sent flying. Like a cannonball, he violently smashed into the house. Yan Xiao, you're really here. Qin Zhong was immediately stunned when he saw the black-robed figure in front of him. Originally, he thought that he had merely fallen into Li Gan's trap. Unexpectedly, Xiaoyan was actually here. In response, Xiaoyan nodded and smiled. He also did not expect that the reason why Qin Zhong would come here was actually because he had fallen into Li Gan's trap. However, this could be considered as trying to be clever and making a fool of himself. Qin Zhong had actually encountered such luck. Li Gan, I gave you a chance last time. Unexpectedly, you actually set your sights on me again. Turning his head, Xiaoyan looked at Li Gan, who had walked out from the ruins. His eyes were filled with ice-cold intent. Previously, because old Luo was present and there were many experts from the ancient city of Wildlands watching, he did not kill Li Gan. However, he did not expect that Li Gan would actually dare to attack the people around him. He truly lived up to the word Gan in his name. Taking the full brunt of the octane blast while being completely unprepared had caused Li Gan quite a bit of injury. The 8 layers of hidden force in particular had caused him a great deal of suffering. Even now, the qi and blood in his body were still churning. Just as he came out from the ruins and saw Xiaoyan, Li Gan's expression could not help but change. The gloomy expression on his face a moment ago instantly disappeared, and was replaced by a deep seriousness. He naturally understood Xiaoyan's strength. If they were to really fight, given Xiaoyan's methods, if he were to use the heavenly flame wheel again, he would have no hope of surviving. Bastard! Why is this fellow really at old Luo's place? If I were to fight with him here, I would not be able to gain the slightest advantage. Hearing Xiaoyan's words, Li Gan was secretly shocked. Even the simplest part of his muscles twitched intensely. He regretted inviting Qin Zhong over for the Void Lightning Pool invitation. From the looks of it now, he was basically digging his own grave. There was naturally no need to say much about Xiaoyan's strength. Putting aside the fact that he had the Alchemist Association and the Yunin Pavilion behind him, just by relying on the Northern King alone, he could at least fight Li Gan to a draw. Additionally, Xiaoyan's frightening dough technique made it so that Li Gan had no chance of winning against Xiaoyan. Hence, since he could not win no matter what, the only thing he could do now was to run away. Thinking until this point, Li Gan could not help but narrow his eyes. A dark light flashed deep within his eyes and a cold smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. It was as though he had a plan in mind. Haha, so it is brother Yan Xiao. Why, is Qin Zhong your friend? Facing Xiao Yan, Li Gan did not dare to be careless. Although Xiao Yan looked young, his strength had reached such a level. How could he be a fool? Hearing Li Gan feigning ignorance, Xiao Yan sneered in his heart. However, his face revealed a trace of suspicion as he asked, "Oh, why brother Qin Zhong is my friend? This matter is now known by almost everyone in the entire ancient wild city. Does Sir Li Gan not know?" Hearing this, a strange expression immediately appeared on Li Gan's face. From the looks of it, it was as though he really did not know anything. So it's like this. Haha, brother Yan Xiao may not know that I have been in seclusion in recent months. I only came out yesterday. I was anxious to find the Void Lightning Pool invitation. I heard rumors in the city that brother Qin Zhong has it, so I tried my best to find him and wanted to exchange it with something. I just didn't expect it to turn out like this. This is really a misunderstanding, haha. Hearing Li Gan's quibbling, Qin Zhong suddenly became a little impatient. He was a hot-tempered person. He only restrained his temper when his strength reached the level of a half-emperor. But now this Li Gan was twisting the truth. How could he tolerate this? But just as Qin Zhong was about to explode, Xiao Yan quietly sent a voice transmission to calm Qin Zhong down. Oh, I want to see what tricks this Li Gan wants to play. After sneering in his heart, Xiao Yan tilted his head slightly and stared at Li Gan. His eyes were filled with cold killing intent, and he said, "Is it a misunderstanding?" "Is that so?" "It's a misunderstanding. But I heard it clearly when I was in the courtyard. It was you who forced Qin Zhong to come here step by step for the Void Lightning Pool invitation in his hands. So, do you still want to explain?" Once these words were spoken, the atmosphere of the place instantly became dense. A fury also rose in Li Gan's heart. After speaking for so long, Xiao Yan in front of him had actually heard what he had said earlier. "Yan Xiao, you dare to trick me." Since he had already made himself clear, Li Gan did not continue to make up stories. He directly roared furiously at Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan merely smiled coldly at this. He twisted his neck and met Li Gan's gaze. He coldly laughed and said, "Why, you don't plan to continue? Since this is the case, let me play with you. Coincidentally, I have recently practiced a kind of Do technique. I will use you to practice it." After his voice sounded, Xiao Yan waved his large hand. A black light flashed, and the huge heavy Xian ruler immediately landed in his palm. His feet moved slightly, and he instantly used the sky extinction step as he charged toward Li Gan. Chapter 250. Bang! Another violent explosion was heard. A figure was sent flying back uncontrollably. Soon after, he smashed heavily onto the ground. Blood was spurting out from his mouth unceasingly. He had practically entered a state of serious injury. Not far away from this person, Xiao Yan was slowly walking toward him. The enormous black ruler in his hand left a ruler mark several inches deep on the ground. Behind him, Qin Zhong was following behind Xiao Yan with a stupefied expression. After witnessing Xiao Yan's violence, Qin Zhong had already become completely numb to the scene before him. From the moment Xiao Yan started attacking the 6-star half-martial emperor before him, the opponent that Qin Zhong believed to be undefeatable was now like a pile of mud before Xiao Yan. That 6-star half-martial emperor's strength was actually so wrong that he did not even have the slightest chance to counterattack before Xiao Yan. Qin Zhong still remembered that when Xiao Yan had first arrived at the desolate land and fought against Li Gan, although he had ultimately defeated Li Gan, he had merely relied on his own movement skill and that frightening Do skill. Furthermore, it was old Luo's display of might in the end. At that time, Xiao Yan, if he were to go all out and not use that Do skill, would at the very most be able to fight Li Gan to a draw. Even if that was the case, the one who would suffer in the end would undoubtedly be Xiao Yan. After all, the strength of a 6-star half-martial emperor not only represented one's own strength, the amount of Do Qi within one's body was also absolutely not something that a 3-star half-martial emperor like Xiao Yan could compare with. Yet now, in merely a few months' time, Xiao Yan's strength had become so powerful. Previously, he had only been able to fight Li Gan to a draw. Yet now he was able to easily take care of Li Gan. This enormous disparity in strength caused Qin Zhong, the person who had witnessed it, to inevitably feel that it was unreal. However, no matter how much he couldn't believe it, it was the truth. Xiao Yan's growth was so fast that it was beyond his imagination. Even Elder Luo couldn't help but praise Xiao Yan. Of course, a 6-star half-martial emperor was a 6-star half-martial emperor. No matter what, his strength was still there for all to see. It would naturally not be easy for Xiao Yan to take care of him. However, no matter how Li Gan tried to counterattack, after being bombarded by Xiao Yan's heavy ruler repeatedly, it was all useless. The power of the sevenfold heaven-breaking ruler also gave Xiao Yan a clearer understanding. After all, he had fought with Luo Jin that day, and had held back no matter what. However, things were different today. Facing Li Gan, Xiao Yan did not feel the slightest bit of burden in his heart. Instead, he was somewhat eager to give it a try. After continuously attacking for 3 feet, this 6-star half-martial emperor had consumed a lot of energy. 3 chi in a row. Each chi was equivalent to a high human rank Do technique. Li Gan naturally couldn't withstand 3 chi cough. What Do technique is this? Under the rubble, Li Gan's body was still buried. He had yet to come out. Compared to this, he seemed to be more concerned about the Do technique that Xiao Yan had used earlier. Xiao Yan's eyes narrowed slightly. His footsteps paused for a moment before he continued to walk forward. The hand that was holding the heavy profound ruler slowly increased its strength, and the huge ruler was lifted slightly. This is a Do technique that I have comprehended not long ago. I call it the sevenfold heaven-breaking ruler. Xiao Yan's eyes narrowed. His gaze was fixed on the rubble, and a dark light flashed through the depths of his eyes. Under the rubble, Li Gan's sinister eyes suddenly shrunk. He was astonished by Xiao Yan's words. Sevenfold heaven-breaking ruler. Earlier, he seemed to have only used 3 chi, if he had used all of it. Li Gan was alarmed in his heart. He was afraid that Xiao Yan would use a few more chi on him. However, after a couple breaths of time, a ruthless expression flashed through Li Gan's eyes. His face under the rubble became somewhat gloomy and distorted. Yin Xiao. Xiao Yan paused his footsteps. At this moment, nearly a quarter of the Do chi in his body had been used up. This was because he was currently on the verge of a breakthrough. Otherwise, he would have used up even more Do chi. Ha! With a loud cry, the rubble in front of Xiao Yan suddenly exploded. The dust and debris were blocked by an invisible force a few feet away from Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan's gaze passed through the dust and saw that Li Gan had actually escaped. Xiao Yan frowned slightly. What was strange was not that Li Gan had escaped, but that he actually had the ability to escape. Li Gan did not have the time to react when the 3 feet of force smashed onto his body. If he had completely endured the 3 feet of force, it would have been impossible for him to speak in a relaxed and indifferent manner. This was what Xiao Yan suspected. Why? Even if it was some kind of body-refining technique, it would not have given him the ability to escape. Muttering softly, Xiao Yan did not bother about Qin Zhong at the side. He kept the dark heavy buster sword and instantly executed the sky extinction step. He quickly caught up with Li Gan, who was quickly escaping. He wanted to know why Li Gan was able to use his physical body to withstand the power of his 3 chi. Above the void, Xiao Yan stood not far in front of Li Gan. With Xiao Yan's speed, he could easily catch up with Li Gan, who was not in his peak condition at the moment. Seeing Xiao Yan again, Li Gan acted out of character. The grave expression on his face was completely swept away. Instead, he revealed an extremely evil smile. Xiao Yan frowned. What was this Li Gan trying to do? With his current condition, Xiao Yan could forcefully kill him in a few breaths if he attacked with all his strength. How did you do it? My 3 chi. Each chi is equivalent to a high human level Do technique. With your strength, after you have endured all of it, it is impossible for you to stand up. Ignoring the evil smile on the corner of Li Gan's mouth, Xiao Yan went straight to the point and asked Li Gan the question in his heart. He did not believe that it was impossible for Li Gan to withstand it without the help of external objects. Hearing this, the evil smile on the corner of Li Gan's mouth became even more sinister. His dark old eyes stared intently at Xiao Yan. The killing intent in his eyes was obvious. Do you really want to know? Speak. With a wave of his hand, the dark heavy buster sword appeared once again. Xiao Yan gave the most direct answer. TSK 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 TSK. With the strength of a 3-star half-emperor, you are actually able to comprehend a high human-level Do technique. Your talent is indeed extremely frightening. If you are allowed to successfully mature, there may be a place for you on this continent in the future. Li Gan laughed. It was unknown whether the meaning of his words was praise for Xiaoyan or some other meaning. As for me, the reason why I was able to block those 3 qi of yours. Li Gan's poisonous snake-like eyes stared at Xiaoyan. He slowly raised his hand. Light flickered on his palm, and a circular plate made of an unknown material appeared on his palm. Immediately after, Li Gan continued to speak. What I relied on was this formation plate. Once these words were spoken, Xiaoyan's eyebrows immediately twitched. He could not help but be slightly startled in his heart. Formation plate. This was something that was refined by a formation master. Xiaoyan still remembered that not long ago, he had killed a little fellow who practiced formation techniques. Now that he thought about it, that fellow seemed to be setting up some kind of formation technique at that time. As for the great star plate that Luo Jin had used back then, it was without a doubt a formation plate. However, at that time, Xiaoyan did not personally see Luo Jin use it. Thus he was naturally unaware. Formation plate, huh? Narrowing his eyes, Xiaoyan muttered in his heart. Chapter 251. So that's how it is. I never imagined that you would actually possess such a thing. After understanding the reason, Xiaoyan could not be bothered to speak any more nonsense with Li Gan. He tightened his grip on the heavy Xian Buster sword, and was about to attack Li Gan. Given Xiaoyan's character, he would naturally not let someone like Li Gan off. After all, Li Gan had already attacked Qin Zhong while he was still in the wildlands. The reason why Li Gan did not kill Qin Zhong was because of Xiaoyan. However, once Xiaoyan left, Li Gan would definitely make things difficult for the clan behind Qin Zhong. Instead of entrusting Qin Zhong to the Alchemist Association at that time, it would be better to let Xiaoyan finish him off first. TSK. Yan Xiao, do you really think that I have spent such a great price to lure you here for? Just as Xiaoyan was about to attack, Li Gan had a cold smile on his face. His face was filled with an expression of victory, as if Xiaoyan had already fallen into a premeditated ambush. Xiaoyan could not help but feel an indescribable sense of danger in his heart when he heard these words. However, when Xiaoyan looked around, there were indeed quite a number of battlefields in the sky. Moreover, the people fighting were all half-emperor level experts. This indeed surprised Xiaoyan. During this half a month, he had indeed overlooked many things. However, this was not enough to cause Xiaoyan to feel threatened. Then, what did Li Gan's words mean? Could it be that this was just a pretense to stall for time? However, based on his many years of battle experience, Xiaoyan did not think that this was a pretense. After all, given Li Gan's current condition, if he could not immediately entrust the medicinal pill to him, even if he delayed for another day, the strength in his body would not improve much. Instead, it would worsen the strength of his organs because he delayed for more time. This kind of delaying tactic was not a wise choice. Given Li Gan's shrewdness, he was naturally aware of this point. TSK. Yan Xiao, do you know who is the most famous person in the Wildlands ancient city during this half a month? Seeing the doubtful expression that was revealed on Xiaoyan's face, Li Gan uttered a sentence in an unknown manner. This caused Xiaoyan to feel a little stunned in his heart. From the meaning of his words, could it be that the person was him? He, that's right, it's you, Yan Xiao. Li Gan shouted loudly. This explosive shout was like a thunderbolt on a clear day, but it caused Xiaoyan's face. His hand, which was holding the heavy Xian Buster sword, involuntarily. His hand, the heavy Xian ruler, and Xiaoyan's hand unconsciously. With a stern cry, Li Gan's voice spread over the entire sky of the ancient savage city. In an instant, a countless number of gazes that were filled with various emotions were shot over. The few battlegrounds that were in an intense battle also swiftly stopped. Gazes that were filled with greed paused on Li Gan for a moment before immediately locking onto Xiaoyan. At this moment, Xiaoyan seemed to be surrounded by countless invisible arrows. His usually calm and unchanging heart stirred up layers of huge waves at this moment. What is going on? Xiaoyan's heart did not know what to do in the face of these people's gazes. He did not even know why these people were staring at him. All he could see was that the feeling that Xiaoyan saw the most among these various gazes was actually greed. What's going on? Xiaoyan frowned deeply as he pondered. However, he was unable to think of a reason in his heart. He had never seen these fellows before, so how could they possibly target him? If it was just greed, then the only thing that could attract a half-emperor expert in the past month was the Emperor-grade complete pill, the Emperor Tribulation pill that he had refined, and the Void Lightning Pool invitation. It's the Void Lightning Pool invitation. Xiaoyan immediately woke up when he thought of this. He immediately understood in his heart that the reason why these people were staring at him was because of the Void Lightning Pool that was about to open. At this moment, Li Gan's sinister laughter rang out once again. Xiaoyan lifted his gaze and frowned as he looked at Li Gan, who was opposite him. This fellow wanted to use this group of half-emperors' greed for the Void Lightning Pool invitation to deal with him. This move could be said to be ruthless. Yan Xiao, do you know how many people have been anticipating your appearance over the past half a month? After all, you also have a Void Lightning Pool invitation. Li Gan's voice was not soft when he spoke. Therefore, everyone in this area could hear him clearly. This also caused the half-emperors to become even more restless. Seeing that the Void Lightning Pool invitation was right in front of their eyes, how could these half-emperors just sit back and do nothing? The weakest amongst them was a 4-star half-emperor. They were not the least bit afraid when facing a 3-star half-emperor like Xiaoyan. Although they had heard of Xiaoyan's battle achievements earlier, that was after all a one-on-one fight. Now there were dozens of half-emperors present. How could Xiaoyan deal with all of them together? Xiaoyan's frown involuntarily deepened when he saw the surrounding half-emperors becoming restless. His expression gradually became somewhat gloomy. A cold glint gathered within his eyes. A frightening spiritual pressure quietly spread at this moment, causing the expressions of the half-emperors to change. Li Gan, you are really scheming. You clearly know that you are no match for me. Therefore you came up with such a method to get them to act on your behalf. TSK. Everyone, you have heard it, right? This is something that he has personally said. If there is anyone amongst you who is able to kill him, the Void Lightning Pool invitation will belong to that person. I think that with everyone's strength, there is no need to fear Yan Xiao, right? Xiaoyan's cold words caused Li Gan to once again laugh coldly. Each of his words caused the sharpness in everyone's eyes to be directed at Xiaoyan. He naturally already had a place for the Void Lightning Pool invitation. All he needed to do was to swiftly kill Qinzhong with a lightning-like momentum while everyone was dealing with Xiaoyan. In this way, not only would he obtain the Void Lightning Pool invitation, but Xiaoyan would also die. This kind of result was what Li Gan hoped to see in his heart. After Li Gan's words, the group of half-emperors immediately moved. They formed an encirclement and surrounded Xiaoyan in the middle. Their sharp gazes looked towards Xiaoyan. An invisible pressure covered the sky. Xiaoyan's face also revealed a grave expression at this moment. TSK. Everyone, quickly attack together and kill Xiaoyan. The Void Lightning Pool invitation is in his storage ring. Apart from that, the D-grade complete Emperor Tribulation pill must also be in his storage ring. As long as we kill Yan Xiao, it will not only be the Void Lightning Pool invitation. Enough! Are you done yet? Before Li Gan's voice sounded, a half-emperor expert not far behind him cried out in an indifferent tone. This caused Li Gan's words to immediately become sluggish. Humph! Whether the Void Lightning Pool invitation is in his body or not has nothing to do with you. As for killing him, we have no enmity with him in the past. Why should we kill him? Haha, that's right. The reason why we are fighting is merely for the Void Lightning Pool invitation. Why should we kill him? As for you, we heard it clearly earlier. You purposely lured Yan Xiao here, and wanted to use the Void Lightning Pool invitation to kill him. You are really bold. You actually dare to use us half-emperors as your tools. After the words of these two people sounded, the surrounding half-emperors immediately turned their gazes towards Li Gan. Their words were filled with disdain towards Li Gan. This caused Li Gan's face to turn green and white. For a moment he was speechless. It was difficult for him to refute. Xiaoyan could not help but laugh coldly in his heart when he saw this. He wanted to use others. Unexpectedly, he went for wool and came home shorn.